Tonight, we will drift into a peaceful sleep with the tales of Greek mythology. Together, we will step into a different world. So lean back comfortably, settle in, and prepare for rest. Imagine sitting thousands of years ago beneath the vast, endless night sky. You were gathered around a crackling fire as the stars gently flicker above. A storyteller begins to speak, sharing the sagas of the mighty gods. They tell of brave heroes and enigmatic creatures, all of whom feel both distant and strangely familiar. This is how Greek mythology was born. These stories, whispered through generations, helped people make sense of the world, learn lessons about life, and explore the very meaning of being human. These legends were not merely for entertainment. They became a silent guide to how humanity understood itself for millennia. In these tales, gods lived atop the peak of Mount Olympus. Heroes embarked on impossible journeys, and ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges. The ancient Greeks attempted to explain everything, from the thunderous storms caused by the powerful Zeus to the changing seasons, through these narratives. While the annual journey of Persephone to the underworld represented the cycle of the seasons, mythology offered guidance not only in understanding the world, but in comprehending humanity's internal voyages concerning love, courage, wisdom, and fate. Perhaps you don't even realize it, but these ancient legends still weave their way into our daily lives. For example, when we speak of someone's Achilles heel or describe a difficult task as Herculean, we are inadvertently referencing these age-old stories. Greek mythology continues to leave its mark on our language, literature, psychology, and even popular culture. It shapes how we think and communicate.
In this content, we will embark on a journey into the captivating world of Greek mythology. Starting from the creation of the universe, we will focus on the adventures of gods and heroes and examine the stories of mortals who dared to defy their destiny. We will meet Zeus, the king of the gods, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, Poseidon, the lord of the seas, and the brave heroes Heracles, Hercules, the cunning Odysseus, and the courageous Achilles. Along the way, we will dive into epic quests, tragic romances, and thrilling adventures, all while exploring the silent lessons that echo thousands of years later. This will be a relaxing storytelling experience that doesn't require you to focus on a screen. You may listen to it as you accompany your tasks, or simply let your imagination roam free. Whether you seek a peaceful evening or are filled with curiosity about these ancient legends, relax, perhaps grab a snack, and allow these fascinating stories to guide you. Now, let us gather around the fire, just as the ancients did, and unlock the doors of an ancient world brimming with mysterious adventures and timeless wisdom. By the end of this journey into the depths of Greek mythology, we will better understand why these captivating stories continue to speak to us in the same quiet way. These voices, carried through stories over millennia, offer powerful narratives about the beginning of everything, long before the first birth. In those times, there was no war, no catastrophe, and no confusion. Only a silent and boundless chaos reigned, defined by emptiness. This infinite void stretched out into vast darkness, devoid of any shape or movement. Within this darkness, an extraordinary transformation began, and the very first entity emerged: Gaia, Mother Earth. Gaia was not merely the ground beneath our feet, but was also shaped as the spirit and body of the world. With her awakening, mountains rose from her form, valleys spread, and wide plains revealed themselves. Gaia became the stable foundation, patiently awaiting the sprouting of life. However, Gaia did not remain alone for long. A new entity was born from her own depths: Tartarus. This unknown realm, located in the furthest extremity of the void and the world's deepest darkness, was a place unimaginable even in the contemplation of the ancient Greeks. A chasm, secluded and utterly separated from the surface world, Tartarus silently persisted.
Gaia's power was not limited to the earth alone. From herself, she created Uranus, the boundless sky, to spread above her. With the emergence of Uranus, the sky opened wide for the first time, and a star-studded dome sheltered Gaia. Uranus and Gaia, together yet separate, formed the first cosmic partnership in the initial process. Gaia's creativity continued ceaselessly, and even the seas found life in her work. A third entity, named Pontus, the representation of all seas, formed alongside Gaia. As Pontus's silently spreading waves flowed calmly yet powerfully across the vast oceans, the world continued to exist in a new balance with the power of the seas. Let us pause for a moment to visualize these ancient entities. Beneath our feet lies the firm and tranquil Gaia. Above stretches the limitless Uranus, and touching the horizon are the seas of Pontus, along with the unknowable and dark chasms of Tartarus. These were the first powers that shaped the world. These beings were far from the gods who directly interacted with humans. They were the primal forces that set the fundamental fabric of reality in motion, silently defining the boundaries of their realms. Gaia, as the creative foundation, represented the essential stability where all life would flourish. Uranus was the power of limitlessness, encompassing the infinite celestial realms. Pontus, with its vast oceans, contributed to this cosmic balance as a representation holding the unique power of the seas. And finally, Tartarus silently guarded the kingdom of dark chasms with its unreachable depth. These four powers were the first great sovereigns existing at the beginning of the mythological universe and the primitive elements that directed reality. Pontus was the deep, unknowable, and endless ocean that surrounded and sustained the world. Tartarus was the silent unknown in the darkest depths, a hidden region filled with incomprehensible secrets. These ancient entities laid the foundation for the world known to the ancient Greeks long before humans arrived. Each had a specific role in the cosmos. Each ruled over a part of existence without uttering a sound, creating balance and order from the emptiness of chaos.
Now, we sit around our imaginary campfire, listening to this story, and we begin to understand why the ancient Greeks found peace and wonder in these narratives. These accounts were their way of grasping the beginning of everything: the earth beneath their feet, the sky stretching above their heads, the oceans surrounding them, and a mysterious darkness they could never fully unravel. As these initial entities became established over time, the stories concerning their children would grow more complex. The next generation, filled with powerful gods and legendary heroes, was about to emerge. But for now, the focus of our story is the first act of creation. Gaia is born from chaos, giving rise to Uranus. Pontus and Tartarus silently prepare the stage for everything that is to come. These primordial forces were not equated with the worship or allegiance later shown to the subsequent gods. Rather, they were more distant, revered yet partially inaccessible beings. Feared and admired for their power, these figures also possessed a mysterious and cold detachment, rarely interfering directly in human life. Their place was to represent the fundamental building blocks of the world, offering a solid context for all that was to follow. They, the primordial deities, shaped the universe long before the gods, heroes, or mortals ever took the stage. Their existence was quietly felt beneath every tale and legend that would be told in the future. They left an enduring mark as the fundamental mainstays of the cosmos. Now, we imagine these colossal forces as we are gathered around our campfire under the star-studded sky. We sit in silence, contemplating what it must have felt like to witness the world's creation for the very first time. This is only the beginning. There are many more stories to be told. But this narrative of how the world first took shape, emerging slowly and profoundly from chaos, will continue to be remembered as potent and compelling. These first entities, who silently formed the foundations of the universe, are the quiet witnesses that inspired all the myths and sagas born much later.
From Gaia the earth, Uranus the sky, Pontus the sea, and Tartarus the dark abyss, a new generation of powerful beings arose. These figures were the children of Gaia and Uranus. They were the mighty Titans who came to take over the governance of the early cosmos. Gaia and Uranus together brought forth the Titan lineage. Each Titan was endowed with dazzling power and held a unique role in the early universe. Oceanus, the eldest of the Titans, represented the boundless waters surrounding the world. He steered the colossal rivers that flowed from the edges of the world, silently nourishing every corner. Hyperion was the Titan of celestial light and brilliance. His presence added meaning to the universe with the warmth of the sun, the soft glow of the moon, and the subtle shimmer of the dawn. Coeus was the guardian of celestial intellect. He observed and protected the mysteries of the stars and constellations. His brother, Krios, ensured the harmony of the night sky by managing the movements and order of these celestial bodies. Iapetus, on the other hand, was a figure representing the struggle and endurance of mortal life. He influenced subsequent generations as a symbol inspiring humanity's resilience. Cronus, the youngest among the Titans, was endowed with a quiet strength that could only be matched by his deep ambition. Beside Cronus stood Rhea, a gentle yet influential representation of motherhood and fertility. Next to her, Themis was the guardian of divine law and order, weaving wisdom into the very fabric of justice. Mnemosyne ensured the continuation of stories and knowledge as the keeper of memory, while Tethys nourished countless freshwater springs and rivers in conjunction with Oceanus. Thea graced the world's beauties by illuminating shimmering precious stones and metals. And Phoebe was the source of prophetic wisdom, illuminating the deep secrets of existence and the thoughts of both gods and mortals.
However, among all these mighty siblings, one was bound by a destiny distinctly separate, Cronus. While the other Titans ruled peacefully in their domains, Uranus, despite being the sky god and their father, had developed a profound fear of his growing children. In his eyes, each was too powerful. Their might and potential were too great, threatening to exceed all boundaries. With deep unease toward Gaia's children, Uranus, particularly the incredibly masterful one-eyed giants, the Cyclopes, and the imposing 50-headed Hecatonchires, imprisoned them in the dark depths of Tartarus. These beings, with their mighty arms and colossal splendor, were Gaia's pride, but were now condemned to endless solitude beneath the earth. Gaia's heart was broken, and she grieved deeply for her children being deprived of freedom. Their entrapment turned into a pain that echoed eternally within her. The sorrow she initially endured in silence gradually evolved into a stubborn determination. She clung firmly to the idea of rescuing her children from this bondage and putting an end to Uranus's cruelty. To this end, she forged a sharp sickle crafted from adamantine, powerful enough to cut even the gods. She then approached the Titans one by one, attempting to persuade them to rise against Uranus. Yet each one recoiled out of the same fear, the immense power of Uranus. Only Cronus, the youngest and most audacious, answered Gaia's call. Agreeing to undertake the task, Cronus prepared for the moment when everything would change as he took the sickle in hand. When Uranus once more approached Gaia, Cronus was ready. He waited silently in the darkness, watching his father. And when the time was right, as Uranus stretched himself out and drew near to Gaia, Cronus moved swiftly. With determination, he swung his sickle and inflicted a deep wound upon his father. With that single act, Uranus was overthrown. His power and dominion came to an abrupt end. The ancient sky god, falling to the earth, responded with a terrible curse upon his son Cronus. He prophesied that one day the same fate would befall Cronus, saying he would be overthrown by betrayal from his own child. Paying no heed to this dark premonition, Cronus, intoxicated with victory, seized control of the universe.
Cronus's reign was powerful and authoritarian, yet it was also peaceful and orderly. He, along with his siblings, presided over this era known as the Golden Age, a time when peace, harmony, and abundance reigned, and the world spontaneously overflowed with fertility. Humans enjoyed nature's bounty effortlessly, and the rivers flowed calmly and reliably. Cronus married Rhea, blending his power with spiritual balance. However, his father's prophecy never left Cronus's mind. This thought gradually made him increasingly suspicious and paranoid. With the birth of each child, Cronus's fears grew stronger in his mind. He saw the newborns as a threat, immediately seizing and swallowing them, trapping them within his dark body. He believed this prevented the prophecy from coming to pass. Yet these cruel acts wounded Rhea's heart more deeply each time. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all had vanished into the dark depths of their father, bound to an unknown fate. But when Rhea became pregnant once more, she decided she could not bear to lose another one of her children. Determined to protect this new baby, whatever the cost, she sprang into action and devised a plan that would change both her own heart and the future. As the time of birth approached, Rhea secretly slipped away from Cronus's watch and traveled to the island of Crete. There, in a quiet cave hidden among the rocks and guarded by dense forests, she gave birth to Zeus. Devising a clever scheme to safely conceal her newborn son, Rhea wrapped a heavy stone in swaddling clothes and returned home, presenting it to Cronus as their new child. Believing he had prevented his father's prophecy, Cronus swallowed the stone without hesitation. Meanwhile, Zeus grew up safely on the slopes of Mount Ida in Crete, under the care of a gentle goat named Amalthea. Amalthea's milk nourished Zeus, giving him strength and energy, while her broken horn, attributed to his legendary care, became the cornucopia and became the symbol of infinite abundance. However, Amalthea was not Zeus's only protector. To keep him hidden from Cronus's paranoia, a group of warrior guardians called the Curetes undertook a crucial task. Whenever the infant god cried, the Curetes would strike their swords against their shields, creating a clangorous noise that echoed through the mountains, masking the baby's cries. This cacophony, while outwardly resembling a military drill, was actually protecting Zeus from Cronus's attention.
For years, Zeus was carefully protected, growing stronger as he was raised in the wilderness of Crete. He climbed the cliffs, ran through the dense forests, and studied the rhythm of nature, becoming a skilled young god who learned to master his surroundings. Every detail, from the movement of storms to the power of the wind, did not escape his notice. This unequivocally prepared him to become the ruler of the skies. Upon reaching adulthood, Zeus became aware of the terrible fate that had befallen his siblings and began to formulate a plan to confront Cronus and free them. Yet he knew that physical strength alone would not suffice. he joined forces with Metis, renowned among the Titans for her intelligence, whose wisdom became Zeus's most critical support in this struggle. Metis was an expert in powerful herbs and potions, and she prepared a special emetic that would force Cronus to release his siblings. Introducing himself to Cronus as a humble cupbearer, Zeus managed to offer his father the potent elixir Metis had prepared. Cronus, suspecting nothing, drank from the goblet filled with wine presented by Zeus. Instantly, the effects took hold, and he began to writhe in violent agony, compelled to release the siblings he had swallowed. Thus, Zeus's hopeful struggle bore fruit. His siblings regained their freedom, and a new chapter in the history of the gods began. Hestia, the graceful goddess of the hearth, a wise power protecting the harvest, Demeter. Zeus's strength took shape alongside Hera, who would one day rule Olympus. Hades, the dark lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, the future ruler of the seas, were now developing their terrifying powers. All were now fully empowered and eager for vengeance. Zeus, alongside his finally liberated siblings, swore to end Cronus's tyranny and restore balance to the universe. And so a bitter war commenced, the legendary Titanomachy, an unforgettable conflict between the old Titans and the new Olympian gods. This war shook the mountains and flattened forests, changing the shape of the world. Through years of exhausting struggle, neither the Titans nor the Olympians could achieve a decisive victory. However, Zeus realized victory required not just raw power, but also mighty allies.
He recalled Gaia's imprisoned children in Tartarus, the gigantic Cyclopes and the mighty Hecatonkhyres. Zeus bravely descended into the terrifying darkness, found these prisoners, and set them free. In return for their liberation, they swore loyalty to Zeus. The Cyclopes, using their extraordinary blacksmithing skills, forged devastating thunderbolts for Zeus. They presented Poseidon with the powerful trident, which allowed him to command the seas. Hades was equipped with a shadowy helm of invisibility. Empowered by their new weapons, the Olympians returned to the battle with full force. They began to gain dominion over the Titans, but the true game-changers of the war were the Hecatonkhyres, who hurled massive rocks and mountains. Attacking with their 100 powerful arms, these giants shattered the Titan resistance. Zeus and his siblings, with their combined forces, won the war. Cronus and his followers were captured and condemned to the deep dungeons of Tartarus. The Hecatonkhyres were now tasked with guarding this abyss for eternity. Thus, the reign of the Titans ended, and the foundations of a new order were laid. Zeus reigned over the skies as the king of cosmic order, while Poseidon took the title of the absolute lord of the seas. Hades transformed into the silent but strict ruler of the underworld. Hera became both Zeus's queen and the guardian of the divine order associated with marriage and fidelity. Demeter blessed the world with fertile fields, abundant harvests, and tranquility.
And so the reign of the Olympian gods began. Balance was restored to the universe. Hestia, to nourish humanity and provide the sustenance needed for civilization to flourish, silently yet perpetually watched over the hearths and homes. She became the source of warmth and security for families and communities. The defeat of Cronus and the Titans represented not only a victory won in battle, but also a major turning point in the balance of the cosmos. The Olympian gods established a new order that would last for ages, reshaping the world in their own image. Yet despite their defeat and imprisonment, the Titans were not entirely forgotten. Their stories continued to echo deeply within the myths and legends, a silent reminder of the primitive power, immense might, and relentless ambition of the past.
The legacy of the Titans, despite their defeat, still maintained many subtle influences on the Olympian gods and humanity. Thus, when Zeus's rule began, a new era opened, one that would resonate throughout history. In this process, the age of the Titans ended, and the gods' influence on the world of mortals was shaped in an infinite way. The defeat of the mighty Titans and their chaining in the depths of Tartarus brought with it a great responsibility for Zeus and his siblings to rebuild the world and create order from chaos. After years of war, the time for peace and stability had finally arrived for both gods and mortals. The Olympians chose Mount Olympus as their new home. Its summit was so high that it was perpetually covered in snow and mist, seemingly reaching the sky itself. On this peak, Zeus built a magnificent palace shimmering with gold and silver. It was surrounded by splendid halls made of marble, with gardens full of fragrant flowers adorning the periphery. In the palace's main hall, specially designed thrones were placed for every god and goddess. Zeus, the natural leader of the victorious Olympians, took the title of King of the Skies and sat upon the highest throne in the palace. The Cyclops, grateful for their freedom, created powerful thunderbolts for him. These weapons were the greatest symbols of his authority. Zeus was wise and often the protector of justice, though he was also known to sometimes act thoughtlessly, succumbing to his emotions. Despite having human-like flaws, his commitment to the values of hospitality and law earned him the respect of his people. Poseidon was Zeus's mighty brother and the lord of the seas. He reigned from a dazzling underwater palace made of corals and shining jewels located near the legendary city of Atlantis, hidden in the depths. Seafarers both respected and feared Poseidon due to his frequently changing temperament, as his shift from calm to storm could be sudden. The trident, forged by the Cyclops, was a weapon that augmented his power, granting him absolute control over storms, waves, and even earthquakes. The third brother, Hades, bore the responsibility for the realm of the dead. Although this dark yet orderly place beneath the earth seemed terrifying to many, Hades was actually a fair and quiet ruler. However, his justice was confined to the realm of the departed. The entrances to the underworld were guarded by his three-headed dog, Cerberus, and the shadowy rivers and caverns were illuminated only by a faint light. After the victory of the Olympian gods, the destinies of both humans and gods had changed.
Hades, thanks to a special helmet that rendered him invisible, could move unnoticed in the worlds of both humans and gods. As he carried out his duties in silence, the sky, the sea, and the underworld were governed through a shared rule among the three brothers. The other Olympian gods, meanwhile, were shaping their own stories and dramas. Hera, who held a crucial place in preserving balance, carried the burden of being Zeus's sister and queen. Overseeing marriages, families, and fidelity, she undertook the duty of protecting couples alongside Zeus. She watched the human world closely, protecting them fiercely. Yet beneath her magnificent presence, she frequently had to contend with jealousy due to Zeus's romantic escapades. This situation led to an unending drama in the divine life on Olympus. Demeter, with her calm and compassionate nature, played a fundamental role in humanity's survival as the goddess of agriculture and fertility. The growth of crops and the changing of seasons were under her control, and the people referred to her as the indispensable one for the cycle of life. Humans expressed their devotion to her through celebrations like the Eleusinian Mysteries, strengthening their belief in the cycle of nature. Hestia, quiet and modest, maintained a tranquil existence as the protector of the home and the hearth. Apollo, on the other hand, shone with his talents. He was the god of the sun, music, healing, and prophecy. Every morning, he drove his golden chariot across the sky, bringing light and warmth to the world. He captivated gods and mortals alike with melodies rising from his golden lyre, while people visited his oracle at Delphi to seek guidance. His twin sister, Artemis, led an independent life as the goddess of the moon, hunting, and the wilderness. She roamed freely in the forests, befriending deer and nymphs, and undertook the task of protecting nature. While assisting women in childbirth, she did not hesitate to punish those who disrespected her. Her silver bow represented both her purity and her power.
Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born from the sea foam near Cyprus. Her extraordinary beauty allowed her to instill passion in gods and mortals simultaneously. However, this meant that intrigues in her romantic relationships were never lacking. Although married to Hephaestus, her secret affair with the warrior god Ares often led to tension. Despite Hephaestus's physical handicap, his mastery was admired throughout Olympus. This silent character, who created weapons, armor, jewelry, and many inventions with his skills at the forge, proved his supremacy in craftsmanship. As the Olympian gods took their places in the universe, they began to profoundly affect human life. Exerting influence over many areas, from agriculture to war, and marriage to family, the gods with their complex personalities inspired rich mythological stories. These narratives carried messages that resonate to this day, offering valuable lessons not only about adventure and drama, but also about virtues and human weaknesses. They continue to preserve their legendary significance through what they said about the love of life, struggle, and morality. The idea of forging a deep connection between humanity and the sacred world of Mount Olympus comes to life in the rich stories of Greek mythology.
When the Olympian gods stepped onto Earth, each assumed unique roles in shaping the world's order and human life. Among these gods, Hermes was particularly noteworthy. Hermes was the swift and clever messenger of Olympus, known for his winged sandals and traveler's cloak. He moved skillfully between the heavens, carried messages between the world and the underworld, and guided souls to their final peaceful resting places. Known for his wit and charm, Hermes was also the god of commerce, travel, and cunning. He even proved his intelligence in his infancy. He stole Apollo's cattle and then impressed Apollo with a lyre he himself created, winning both his forgiveness and his friendship. Another remarkable god of Olympus was Ares, the god of war. In contrast to Athena's methods of strategy and rationalism, Ares was more associated with chaos and raw power. Representing the harsh realities of war, Ares was an entity whose fury and passion for violence often made him difficult, even for the other gods to handle. Yet even with these traits, he was a figure to whom warriors offered their hopes for courage and victory. He symbolized the unstoppable spirit of a true battle.
Against this intensity of chaos, Dionysus represented joy and playfulness. As the god of wine and revelry, Dionysus led people to forget the worries of daily life and pursue a life full of passion. He bestowed upon humans the knowledge of cultivating grapes and making wine. He was the inspiration for festivals adorned with dance, song, and laughter. However, Dionysus was not merely a god of entertainment. He was also a symbol of rebirth and renewal. His followers believed that by losing themselves under his guidance, they would forge a divine connection and discover the deeper meanings of life. This new generation of Olympian gods formed a diverse and rich community, representing every element of the universe. Their complex features, encompassing good and evil, wise and foolish distinctions, made them even more relatable to humans. Consider their king, Zeus. He was the leader of all gods, mighty yet not free of flaws. His numerous romantic escapades frequently led to chaos on Olympus, forcing him to face the jealous fury of his wife, Hera. Yet Hera was a figure dedicated to protecting her family, defending its fidelity. Poseidon, the god of the sea, evoked both great admiration and fear. As the master of the seas, storms, and earthquakes, he was as volatile as the ocean itself. One moment he was calm, and the next he could shake the earth with powerful storms. Athena was the shining star of wisdom and strategy. Born from Zeus's head, this warrior goddess helped humans develop their civilizations by bestowing knowledge and practical skills upon them. On the other hand, there was Aphrodite with her unique beauty. This goddess representing love, passion, and charm was frequently at the center of the intriguing events on Olympus. Athena's love affairs, particularly her bond with Ares, often disrupted the order among the gods, and her marriage to the quiet and skilled blacksmith god Hephaestus also suffered from this tension. Despite all these intrigues,
Hephaestus was always focused on creating wonders in his forge in the depths of Olympus. This humble god, who produced powerful weapons and artifacts of unparalleled beauty, stood out with his abilities, even though his calm nature sometimes led him to be underestimated.
In ancient Greece, cities showed reverence to the gods appropriate to their unique characteristics and adopted worshipping them as a form of devotion. For example, Athens built temples to Athena, symbolizing the olive tree she gifted for wisdom and prosperity. Sparta praised Ares' military might, and Corinth celebrated Aphrodite's beauty with festivals. Through rituals and prayers, people offered sacrifices to the gods, seeking divine grace and adding meaning to their lives. Zeus's leadership also brought with it justice and moral values. Stories in Greek mythology often contained important lessons. The most prominent of these were punishing the arrogant while rewarding the humble. For instance, Apollo's victory against the monster Python at Delphi taught resistance against evil, while Dionysus's adventures demonstrated both the joy and the dangers of balanced pleasure in life. Artemis, by protecting wildlife, taught respect for the balance of nature and its sacredness. Unfortunately, life on Olympus was never entirely peaceful. Aphrodite's relationships created painful moments with Hephaestus, often leading her to regret her infidelities. Hera's fury over Zeus's endless love affairs led to drama and revenge both among the gods and in the human world. Apollo and Artemis always maintained a courageous stance in defending their mother, Leto. Even Hera's jealousy faltered in the face of this bond. Despite all these conflicts, the gods realized they needed each other, and through the unity of their powers, the world continued to be held in balance. Zeus, despite his flaws, was a wise and just leader whose decisions impacted the fate of both gods and mortals. Humans deeply respected him, expressing their devotion through festivals like the Olympic Games. Similarly, rituals such as the Eleusinian Mysteries, held for Demeter, the goddess of fertility, were among the ways people honored the gods and aimed to teach the deeper meanings of life. Ultimately, the legend of Olympus became much more than a mere story. It shaped the Greek perception of the world and their place within it. The gods, like humans, succumbed to passions, faced their fears, and struggled to achieve their goals. As the myths were passed down through generations, they served to understand right and wrong, life and death, joy and sorrow. The Olympian family created a timeless legacy. Their stories remained fascinating and meaningful in every era.
When the gods settled into their magnificent palace on Mount Olympus, they began to observe the world below. There was humanity, in need of them and seeking help. Yet, among all, one figure stood out who fostered a special affection for humankind. Prometheus, the wise Titan, known for his compassion and intelligent wisdom, became central to the creation story of mankind. His story also explains the reason for humanity's current life filled with struggles. In those times, when the world was young and untouched, hope and resilience were paramount. Zeus assigned Prometheus and his brother, Epimetheus, the task of populating the world with living creatures. Epimetheus enthusiastically embarked on this duty, but unlike his cautious brother, he acted more thoughtlessly and impetuously. He quickly began distributing gifts to all the animals. He gave strength to some, speed to others, sharp teeth, thick fur, or wings to yet others. However, he neglected to plan ahead, and before realizing it, had exhausted all these qualities, leaving nothing useful to bestow upon humans. Prometheus, seeing Epimetheus's mistake and wishing to rectify the situation, used clay and water with great care, meticulously shaping each human figure. He created them in the likeness of the gods with gentle touches. Fragile yet filled with infinite potential, these first humans became delicate works of art in his hands. Finally, Prometheus offered them an extraordinary gift by breathing a small spark of divine life into them. Despite their fragility, humans now possessed the capacity for immense greatness. But life was not easy for these first humans. They lacked the claws to help them hunt, nor the thick fur to protect them from the cold. They were deprived of great physical strength. They shivered in the cold, feared wild animals, and huddled together for shelter. They were defenseless against the darkness and struggled to cope with the wrath of nature. Prometheus witnessed humanity's struggle and felt deep sorrow within him. He understood they needed something powerful, something that would ensure their survival and give them the strength to build a better life. He knew that thing was fire. But fire was sacred, a power closely guarded by Zeus and reserved only for the gods. Zeus knew that if humans possessed fire, they would become independent, creative, and powerful, perhaps even strong enough one day to challenge the gods.
Therefore, Zeus refused to share the fire, hoping to keep humans in eternal dependence. However, Prometheus could not remain indifferent to the suffering of humanity. One night, he secretly sneaked into Mount Olympus and took a small ember from the sacred hearth. He carefully hid it inside a hollow fennel stalk and hurriedly brought it down to the people. Humans stared in amazement when they first saw the fire. This warm, glowing flame changed everything. It provided them with security and warmth. They cooked their food, and they began to take the first steps of their civilization. Fire fueled technology, art, and thought. It settled in the heart of their new civilizations. However, when Zeus learned that Prometheus had stolen the sacred fire, he was consumed by rage. He would not forgive this betrayal. He demonstrated his fury with a terrible punishment, chaining Prometheus and condemning him to solitude. The rocky mountain in the distant Caucasus is considered one of the most striking scenes in mythological narratives. Every day, a gigantic eagle would swoop down to tear apart Prometheus's liver, and every night, the liver would regenerate, only for the eagle to repeat the torment. Despite this eternal suffering, Prometheus never regretted his decision to bear his punishment with honor. This sacrifice is forever remembered as a powerful symbol of courage and love for the human race. Yet Zeus's anger did not end here. He devised a more cruel plan to remind humans of their fragility and ensure they knew their place. With a masterfully crafted plan, Zeus assigned Hephaestus the task of creating Pandora. Hephaestus shaped this first woman from clay, and the gods presented her with many gifts. Aphrodite bestowed beauty and charm upon her. Hermes added wit, and Athena granted her wisdom and grace. However, Zeus placed a box among these gifts, a box sealed with troubles, sorrows, and calamities inside. Pandora knew nothing about the secret contents of this box. Pandora was sent to Epimetheus. Epimetheus ignored Prometheus' warning not to accept gifts from Zeus and immediately showed sincere devotion to Pandora. But it was that box that plunged Pandora into great curiosity. Though she resisted opening the lid, she eventually succumbed to her inquisitiveness. As soon as she lifted the lid of the box, all the calamities, diseases, wars, famines, and angers were released into the world. When she hastily closed the box, only one thing remained inside: hope.
Since then, although human life has been filled with suffering, hope has continued to exist quietly and determinedly, accompanying humanity by providing strength and comfort even in the darkest times. Following the opening of Pandora's box, the world was divided into different ages, periods that characterized humanity's life and their interactions with the gods. These ages displayed a variety that reflected the ups and downs of human nature, ranging from peace to conflict. First came the Golden Age, an almost mythical era of peace and happiness. Under Cronus's gentle rule, people lived without fear, entirely free from hardships such as hunger or struggle. Nature offered its bounty generously. Trees grew their own fruits freely. Rivers flowed clearly, and the earth willingly yielded its riches. Completely devoid of violence, people in the Golden Age had an effortless, pain-free, and joyful life. Even death was perceived as a graceful and tranquil transition, like slowly stepping into a peaceful world. The peaceful spirits of the Golden Age transformed after their lives into benevolent beings who protected humanity, silently guiding and helping when needed. However, like all good things, the Golden Age eventually ended and was replaced by the Silver Age. This period symbolized a transition beyond innocence into a more complex era. With Zeus now reigning from Olympus, humans had begun to forget their duties to the gods. They neglected traditions such as offering sacrifices or honoring the gods, becoming careless and ungrateful. Although their lives were still comfortable, selfishness and disrespect for traditions had taken hold of them. Zeus experienced deep disappointment in this situation. In reaction to the people's irreverence, he abruptly ended the Silver Age, giving humanity a harsh lesson on the importance of gratitude. Although the spirits of this age were considered honorable, they were tainted by their failures compared to the legacy of their Golden Age predecessors. Their failure to appreciate divine generosity left a lasting mark on them.
Following this disappointment, the Bronze Age was born. known for its obsession with war and power. Humans learned to make weapons and armor out of bronze, but instead of using this skill for peace, they dedicated themselves to endless wars. A world emerged where violence reigned, and only strength was considered a measure of value. War replaced peace, and constant conflict replaced tranquility. Societies built walls and armies, struggling solely for dominance. However, this never-ending power struggle led to their downfall, because humans destroyed each other through these continuous conflicts. The spirits of the Bronze Age, instead of leaving wisdom or a lasting legacy like their successors, only left bitter lessons about the consequences of unchecked aggression. After all these hardships, a very special period began for humanity, the Age of Heroes. This era was filled with individuals who were unprecedented. Heroes whose courage became the subject of legends rose to prominence in this age. Heracles stood out with his impossible labors. Achilles shaped the Trojan War with his bravery and strength. Perseus defeated Medusa and saved kingdoms, while Odysseus faced monsters and embarked on difficult journeys filled with magic. These heroes did not merely survive. They overcame great difficulties, challenged the gods, and achieved feats that would be talked about for generations. Many heroes who displayed courage and honor in their lives found eternal peace in the Elysian fields when they died. They enjoyed an afterlife in happiness and splendor. They were remembered forever as shining examples of human potential. Finally, humanity reached a challenging period it found itself in, the Iron Age. Unlike the previous ages, shaped by abundance and heroism, the Iron Age was a time full of struggle, uncertainty, and harsh conditions. People had to work very hard, but received limited rewards for their efforts. Problems like injustice, greed, and deceit became widespread. Yet, despite all these difficulties, humanity continued to endure. Clinging to hope, the last thing left in Pandora's box, elevates humanity's endeavor to preserve the inner light even in the darkest times. In this era, the gods seem distant, and their interventions are rarely felt, while mortals shape their lives by relying on their own strength and resilience. The fire that Prometheus bravely gifted symbolizes humanity's creativity and determination, while also representing the spark that fuels our innovative spirit.
In a world full of challenges, humans never give up the effort to improve their living conditions. The attempt to revive the sense of justice and compassion reveals the complex and rich story humanity has sustained from the past to the present. Prometheus's courage and resistance, while reminding us of creativity, symbolize humanity's determination to improve its own destiny for the sake of compassion and sacrifice. This spirit shapes human nature with an endless desire for innovation and resilience. Pandora's story, on the other hand, creates a contrast. It reveals the complexity of human nature, the tension between curiosity and consequence. The concept of hope arriving with difficulties teaches that suffering is inevitable, but hope remains a powerful driving force that can guide us even in the most challenging times. The 5 ages emerge as a reflection of the unique lessons of human history. The Golden Age highlights the value of harmony, simplicity, and kindness. The Silver Age warns us about arrogance and ingratitude. The Bronze Age serves as a warning, symbolizing the violent consequences brought by aggression and uncontrolled ambition. The Age of Heroes sets the stage for courage and the pursuit of excellence, showing that individuals can reach the highest peaks through integrity and determination. The Iron Age reflects the reality of humankind, characterized by the struggle with complexity, moral ambiguities, as well as resilience and hope. After Zeus and his siblings took their thrones on Olympus, the world began to overflow with humans, animals, and mysterious creatures. However, Zeus quickly noticed the greedy, cruel, and God-scoffing attitudes of humans. Succumbing to his anger, he decided to destroy humanity with a great flood. Yet, Zeus did not wish to erase all humans. He remembered 2 gentle and respectful individuals. Deucalion and his wife, Pyrrha, were a special couple, noted for their deep respect for the gods and their kindness towards others. Deucalion was the son of Prometheus, the clever Titan who created humans from clay and gifted them the valuable secret of fire. Pyrrha was the wise daughter of Epimetheus, the brother of Pandora, who unintentionally unleashed calamity upon the world. Despite their complex heritage, Deucalion and Pyrrha were known for their honesty and good hearts. Due to their humility and deep reverence for the gods, they were deemed worthy of being spared from Zeus's wrath.
Prometheus had been punished for helping humanity and chained to the peak of a desolate mountain. As he watched the dark sky, he realized Zeus's plans and desperately sought a solution for his beloved son's deliverance. He found a way to secretly relay a warning, urging Deucalion to prepare immediately. With absolute trust in his father, Deucalion set about building not just a boat, but a large and sturdy wooden chest. It was sealed with great care and attention, designed to protect them from the fury Zeus was about to unleash. Deucalion worked tirelessly, knowing the chest was the only hope for his and Pyrrha's survival. Soon, dark clouds obscured the sun, thunder echoed across the vast sky, lightning struck fiercely, and rain began to fall as if it would never stop. The downpour, which initially seemed ordinary, quickly intensified. Rivers overflowed and merged with lakes, and the rising oceans swallowed towns, forests, and eventually even the highest mountains. Humans sought safety, but found nowhere to escape. Yet Deucalion and Pyrrha remained safe, sealed inside their wooden chest. After 9 long and arduous days,
the rains finally subsided. As the floodwaters slowly receded, their chests settled on the summit of Mount Parnassus. When they emerged from the chest, the world was silent and empty. Everywhere was covered in mud and debris. No sound was heard except for the dripping of water. Deucalion and Pyrrha searched for signs of life, but they called out in vain. They were truly alone in the world. They were the last two humans on Earth. Their hearts were broken by this solitude. They knew it was impossible to rebuild the future of humanity by themselves. Together, they made their way toward a sacred place, the temple of Themis, the wise goddess of justice and prophecy. Kneeling at her altar, they sought guidance to bring life back to the world. Themis was moved by their heartfelt plea and answered with an enigmatic instruction. Toss your mother's bones behind your backs. They struggled to grasp the meaning of these words. The idea of disturbing their mother's bones felt both wrong and distressing. In deep confusion, they pondered the instruction in silence. Suddenly, a spark of understanding lit up Deucalion's eyes. He realized that the mother the goddess spoke of was not their human mothers, but Gaia herself, Mother Earth.
The bones referred to were not actual bones, but the stones randomly scattered across the vast mud-covered land. A wave of relief and hope prompted them to stand up and start gathering the stones. This process proceeded with quiet reverence. Each in turn gently threw the stones behind their back, fulfilling the command given by the goddess. As each stone touched the ground, something extraordinary began to happen. The stones transformed before their eyes, the cold and lifeless rocks evolving into warm, breathing human forms. The stones thrown by Deucalion slowly turned into sturdy and strong men. Those thrown by Pyrrha transformed into graceful and nurturing female figures. Before long, an entirely new generation of humans emerged. They watched in awe the vitality of the world being reborn. Deucalion and Pyrrha became the wise leaders and guides of this new humanity. They taught them kindness, respect, and humility. Through their gentle guidance, the world began to bloom with life once more. Farms and families brought life to the empty lands, and communities began to flourish. Over time, the people who sprang from the stones began to spread. They grew from villages into towns and later into great civilizations. They carried with them the lessons of humility and kindness inherited from the Great Flood. As humanity continued to develop, mysterious creatures also began to emerge on land and sea. Some were friendly, while others became terrifying entities. All of them brought both wonder and danger to the human world, altering its order. Among these creatures were the Cyclopes, gigantic beings easily recognizable by the single large eye in the center of their forehead. Not all Cyclopes were alike. Some were master craftsmen, known for their intellect and skills, supporting the gods by creating powerful weapons. Legendary armaments like Zeus's frightening thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helm of invisibility were crafted by their hands. These gentle Cyclopes continued to assist the gods, working silently beneath the earth.
However, the other part of their species was savage and dangerous. They preferred to live far away from humans and gods. They secluded themselves in deep caves, tending to vast flocks of sheep. They protected their animals with great ferocity against uninvited guests. The most famous among these savage beings was Polyphemus, a terrifying giant living alone on a secluded island. Polyphemus's great strength allowed him to crush rocks with ease. His story became legendary thanks to Odysseus. After the Trojan War, Odysseus accidentally stumbled upon the giant's cave. Polyphemus imprisoned him and his crew in the cave, blocking the exit with a massive boulder. In a desperate attempt to escape, Odysseus devised a clever plan and used a sharp burning stake to stab Polyphemus's single eye, blinding him. Roaring desperately, Polyphemus searched for the hero and his crew, but could not find them. Finally, Odysseus managed to escape the giant by hiding underneath the sheep. He fled the cave, deceiving the angry and blinded Cyclops. There were other powerful beings roaming the world during this period, known simply as the giants. These colossal creatures, born from the depths of Gaia, were strong enough to shake mountains and crack the ground beneath their feet. Identifying themselves as warriors, these frightening beings sought to challenge even the gods. Ultimately, their desire to overthrow the Olympians led to an epic war known as the Gigantochemy. This great conflict involved both gods and heroes. Zeus wielded his thunderbolts. Athena brandished her strong shield and spear, while Apollo shot his flaming arrows. Heracles, or Hercules, one of the bravest mortal heroes, fought tirelessly by their side. The giants retaliated violently, hurling gigantic boulders and ripping mountains from their places. Each battle thundered in both the heavens and on earth, shaking the very foundations of the world. However, after a long and exhausting struggle, with the aid of Heracles, the Olympian gods succeeded in defeating these dangerous beings. Many giants were imprisoned deep underground, trapped beneath volcanic mountains. It is rumored that their restless struggles have caused earthquakes and eruptions for generations.
Subsequently, the story of Medusa, one of the most terrifying and enigmatic creatures roaming ancient Greece, took shape. Unlike other monsters, Medusa was once a young woman whose graceful appearance and beautiful hair inspired admiration. Unfortunately, this beauty also attracted unwanted attention. Poseidon, the sea god, pursued Medusa and eventually confronted her in Athena's sacred temple. Enraged by the desecration of her temple, Athena punished Medusa by turning her beauty into a horrifying curse. Her soft hair transformed into a writhing mass of venomous snakes, and her elegant eyes became lethal weapons. Anyone who dared to look directly upon her face was instantly turned to stone. Terrified by her own power and ostracized by the world, Medusa was forced to live a life of misery and isolation. She withdrew to a distant, hidden sanctuary. Many warriors who attempted to defeat her failed, turning into stone. The area around her wild refuge overflowed with unforgettable statues formed by these unsuccessful warriors. Finally, a hero named Perseus acted with determination to succeed where others had failed. Guided by Athena, he set out to end Medusa's tragic curse. Using a brightly polished bronze shield as a mirror, Perseus managed to approach cautiously without being directly exposed to Medusa's lethal gaze. With a sharp strike, he ended Medusa's tragic existence and placed her severed head securely into a protective satchel for transport. Throughout his journeys, he used this head as a weapon against his other enemies, achieving victory. In the remote corners of the island of Crete, yet another terrifying creature lay hidden. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, was a monster whose appearance and existence caused terror. Its story began with a curse placed upon King Minos. The king's wife, Pasiphae, fell victim to a mystical enchantment and eventually gave birth to this monstrous creature.
Horrified and ashamed by this situation, King Minos needed someone who could employ their mind and skills, and he sought help from Daedalus, known for his genius. Daedalus, the famous inventor, designed a complex structure known as the labyrinth. This gigantic construction, made up of winding tunnels and corridors that seemed impossible to exit, served as a prison for the Minotaur. Every year, King Minos demanded that 7 young men and 7 young women be sent to him from Athens. This demand meant determining who would be sacrificed to feed the Minotaur. This horrifying tribute continued for years, until the brave Athenian youth, Theseus, intervened. Theseus volunteered to face the Minotaur and traveled to Crete. There he met Ariadne, King Minos' daughter. Ariadne fell in love with him and decided to help Theseus by giving him a ball of thread. She intended for this to help him find his way out of the labyrinth after defeating the monster. Equipped with Ariadne's gift, Theseus descended into the terrifying darkness of the labyrinth and finally confronted the Minotaur. Displaying great courage and determination, he managed to defeat the monster, putting an end to these horrific sacrifices forever. However, the Minotaur was not the only creature the ancient Greek world faced. Another dangerous entity was the terrifying Hydra, a multi-headed monster, each head equipped with venomous fangs. The Hydra lived in the dark swamps near Lerna and defended its territory with great ferocity. Even more horrifying was the fact that when one of its heads was severed, 2 new heads would grow in its place. This feature made it seem almost impossible to defeat. Hercules, or Heracles, was tasked with overcoming this dangerous creature as one of his penal labors. Realizing he could not accomplish this alone, Hercules took his clever nephew Iolaus with him. During the battle, when Hercules cut off one of the Hydra's heads, Iolaus immediately cauterized the stump with fire to prevent new heads from emerging.
By combining strength and intelligence in this way, they finally defeated the Hydra and made the area safe. But this was not enough. Another creature was terrorizing the countryside in those days. The fearsome Chimera, whose entire body was composed of mixed forms, with the head of a lion, the head of a goat protruding from its back, and a tail shaped like a snake. This monster breathed fire, damaged villages, and drove the region into fear.
The brave hero Bellerophon, with the help of the goddess Athena, dared to challenge this creature by taming the winged horse named Pegasus. Safe on the back of Pegasus, which allowed him to fly in the air, Bellerophon avoided the chimera's scorching flames and dangerous claws. Thanks to his sharp intellect and agility, he managed to defeat this fearsome monster. With the death of the chimera, the people found peace once again. Through these heroic tales, the ancient Greek world witnessed the demise of the most terrifying creatures of the era, and peace was restored. One of the most ancient and renowned of these heroes was Perseus, whose story began long before his birth. His adventure centered on the anxieties of his grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, due to a prophecy aimed at him. Horrified by the news he received from an oracle at Delphi, Acrisius was given a definite warning that his grandson would one day be his downfall. Determined to escape this fate, he imprisoned his only daughter, Danae, in a solid bronze tower. He believed that this would ensure she would never have children. However, even the strongest locks and tightest walls could not stop Zeus, who noticed Danae's unique beauty. The king of Olympus transformed himself into a radiant shower of gold, seeping through the cracks of the tower and filling the dark room with light and warmth. Following this mysterious encounter, the birth of Perseus was believed to shape a great destiny for him. Learning that Danae had given birth, Acrisius was furious, and fearing the prophecy would come true, he dared not harm his daughter or grandson. Fearing the wrath of the gods, he sealed them inside a sturdy chest. When he cast the chest into the surging sea, he hoped the malicious waves would carry them away forever. But Zeus intervened for their safety and guided the chest safely to the island of Seriphus. On the island, a kind fisherman named Dictys found Danae and Perseus. He took them in as his own family and raised the child. He took care to instill courage, humility, and strength in Perseus. But their peaceful life did not last long. Dictys' powerful and deceitful brother, Polydectes, was the king of the island. Polydectes soon noticed Danae's captivating beauty and desired to possess her. The cunning king devised plans, moving with the pretext of a wedding feast, to overcome Perseus' resolute defense in protecting his mother.
Aiming to get rid of the young hero, Polydectes organized a grand feast and demanded ostentatious gifts from his guests. Perseus, not being wealthy, felt the shame of being unable to offer anything in front of the whole community. The king further fueled this by mocking him. In response, Perseus, succumbing to his impulse, promised the king he would bring him anything he desired. Polydectes, mockingly, asked for Medusa's head. Defeating Medusa was nearly impossible.
almost everyone who looked at her turned to stone. But Perseus was brave and determined. The gods rewarded his resolve by siding with him. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, appeared to Perseus and helped him protect himself by scorning Medusa. She gifted him a shining and polished bronze shield. This shield was no different from a mirror against Medusa's lethal gaze. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, also gave Perseus a sharp sword. This sword could cut through anything, and along with his winged sandals, allowed the hero under his protection to move quickly. Perseus's mission was to find Medusa's hiding place, and for this he was told he first needed to visit the 3 mysterious sisters called the Graiae. The instructions of these old women who shared a single eye and a single tooth could lead him to Medusa's secret lair. With the guidance of the Graiae, Perseus moved swiftly and flew towards the dark and distant realm of the 3 ancient Gorgons. His task was difficult, but the support of the gods gave him hope. The sisters lived in eternal darkness, sharing their destiny with a common eye and tooth. They constantly circled around these precious objects. Perseus waited patiently for the right moment and finally, skillfully snatched the eye. This loss plunged the sisters into despair, fueling their desperate rage. They began to beg Perseus to return their valuable eye. But Perseus said he would only agree to their request if they described the way to Medusa's mysterious lair. Forced to comply with his demands, the sisters reluctantly provided Perseus with detailed directions. Perseus, as promised, gave them back their eye and set off toward his final destination with excitement in his heart. When he reached Medusa's lair, he found a dark and terrifying cave filled with petrified victims. Each figure was a testament to the brutal consequences of Medusa's deadly gaze. Cleverly using the shining mirror shield provided by Athena, Perseus avoided the risk of looking directly at Medusa. He slowly advanced toward Medusa's terrifying face. With fear and adrenaline surging within him, he swung his sword at the perfect moment and decapitated Medusa. Immediately after this event, the winged horse Pegasus emerged and soared toward the skies. Perseus, safely preserving Medusa's head, had fulfilled his mission.
Athena gave him a bag that could safely contain this deadly power. However, Perseus's adventure was not yet complete. On his return journey, he saw a princess chained to a distant shore. The beautiful Andromeda had been sacrificed to appease Poseidon's anger towards her mother. Her mother's boasting that her beauty surpassed that of the sea nymphs had enraged Poseidon, causing him to send a sea monster to their realm. Determined to save Andromeda, Perseus confronted the monster, and at a precise moment, he held up Medusa's head and turned the creature to stone. The monster's power was broken, remaining petrified forever. A grateful Andromeda became part of Perseus's destiny as his beloved wife. Upon returning to Seriphus, he learned that his mother was being tormented by the cruel King Polydectes. Perseus walked toward the king's throne room to help his mother. Without hesitation, he revealed Medusa's head once more, turning Polydectes and his supporters to stone. The tyranny was over, and peace returned to the island. He established justice by placing the kind fisherman Dictys on the throne. Handing Medusa's head over to Athena, Perseus knew that this sacred object would be preserved forever on the goddess's shield. Thus, Medusa's power would inspire future generations of heroes. Meanwhile, another heroic story began with Theseus. As the son of King Aegeus of Athens, Theseus was raised in the countryside by his wise mother during his youth. Upon reaching adulthood, his mother guided him to reveal his noble heritage and told him to return to his homeland. On his journey to meet his father, Theseus overcame many dangers. He took the risk of traveling by land instead of sea, and, in the process, faced ruthless enemies like the giant bandit Periphetes, known as the Club Bearer. He defeated them with his wit and courage. He then encountered the robber named Sinis, who tormented travelers and vanquished him using his own savage methods.
Theseus, taking his powerful club, defeated his opponents with deep intelligence. Next, he encountered the robber named Sinis, who tied his victims to bent trees and ruthlessly tore them apart. Theseus won a victory by neutralizing Sinis with his own dreadful methods. Then, he challenged the wild Cremonian sow, which terrorized the villages, and killed it after a tough struggle. Along the way, he also neutralized Sciron, who forced travelers to wash his feet before kicking them off a cliff into the sea. He also encountered and dealt with Procrustes, who cruelly forced his victims to fit his bed, cutting off those who were too short to stretch and severing the limbs of those who were too long to fit. Growing stronger and wiser with each victory, Theseus was hailed as a hero by the time he finally reached Athens. Athens, at that time, was bound by a terrible treaty to send 7 young men and 7 young women every year to Crete. These unfortunate youths were sacrificed to the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature, imprisoned in a complex structure called the labyrinth. Theseus was determined to put an end to this oppression. He volunteered to go to Crete and told his father that if he succeeded, he would return with white sails instead of black as a sign of victory. Upon arriving in Crete, he attracted the attention of Ariadne, King Midas's brave and helpful daughter. Impressed by Theseus's courage, Ariadne decided to help him. She secretly gave him a ball of thread and instructed him to release the thread as he entered the labyrinth, so that he could easily find his way out after defeating the Minotaur. Guided by Ariadne, Theseus held tightly to the thread as he stepped into the dark and winding passages. In the depths of the labyrinth, the Minotaur's savage roar echoed through the tunnels. Theseus came face to face with the gigantic creature, and a fierce battle ensued. He skillfully avoided the deadly attacks from the Minotaur's horns, weakening the creature with swift and careful blows. After a relentless struggle among the stone walls, he achieved a decisive victory.
Following his triumph,
He quickly retreated along Ariadne's thread, safely leading the Athenian youths out of the labyrinth. The victorious Theseus managed to escape from Crete, writing a heroic tale that would go down in history. Approaching home with a glorious victory, the story of Ariadne and Theseus was overshadowed by a tragedy. On the return voyage to Athens, Theseus forgot his promise to hoist white sails on the cliffs. Meanwhile, King Aegeus, believing his son had perished, saw the black sails still flying. This misunderstanding deeply wounded Aegeus's heart and plunged him into grief. Overwhelmed by sorrow, the king threw himself from the cliffs into the sea. This sea became eternalized by his name, henceforth known as the Aegean Sea. Theseus, however, was shaken by the guilt of this situation, but remained a hero determined to honor his father's memory. His courage and wise rule lived on in stories told for generations, and as a king, he succeeded in earning the respect of his people. In the same period, the story of another hero took the stage. That was Heracles, or Hercules, the son of Zeus and Alcmena. Zeus had deceived Alcmena by disguising himself as her husband, and from this union Heracles was born. Destined for greatness from birth, Heracles became the target of the goddess Hera's jealousy. In her rage, Hera sent 2 deadly serpents to his cradle to kill the infant. Yet Heracles, even as a child, displayed his incredible strength by strangling the snakes with his bare hands, neutralizing them. This first miracle heralded his extraordinary destiny. While Heracles' bravery gradually became legendary, Hera's hatred did not end. The goddess, out of jealousy, cast a terrible spell upon Heracles, driving him into madness. During this enchantment, the hero lost control and harmed his loved ones. Subsequently, the hero, regaining his senses, consulted the oracle at Delphi to seek atonement for the sins he had committed. The oracle told him he must serve King Eurystheus, but Hera was secretly manipulating things against Heracles by the king's side. Thus, Heracles was given 12 labors. These tasks involved challenges that exceeded human limits and forged his legend.
In his first labor, Heracles had to overcome the Nemean lion. This terrifying monster, whose hide could not be pierced by any weapon, was tracked by Heracles, who managed to defeat the lion with his bare hands after a fierce struggle. As a symbol of his victory, he wore the lion's durable hide as armor. In his next task, he faced the multi-headed Lernaean Hydra. This monster, where 2 new heads emerged every time one was severed, was not easy to defeat. But with the help of his clever nephew, Iolaus, he prevented new heads from growing by cauterizing each wound of the beast, and finally vanquished the Hydra. In his third labor, he had to capture the swift-footed Cyrenaean hind, a creature with golden antlers, which was the sacred animal of the goddess Artemis. This task was a struggle that tested Heracles' patience and skill. Heracles' story became an epic not only of physical strength, but also of perseverance and will.
his victories continued to be a source of inspiration for generations. For a year, Heracles carefully tracked the Erymanthian boar through mountains, forests, and valleys, finally succeeding in capturing it. He respectfully presented the boar, which he had captured without harm, to Eurystheus. Following this success, Heracles proved his ability to face the wilderness and unwittingly earned the admiration of Artemis's graceful power. He tirelessly tracked the gigantic wild boar through snow-covered mountains, this snarling creature that terrorized the villages, capturing it alive and carrying it bravely. King Eurystheus, terrified at the sight of the boar, hid himself inside a bronze jar. Heracles returned with a triumphant posture, but was immediately assigned another task: cleaning the Augean stables. These filthy stables, accumulated with years of waste, housed thousands of cattle. Realizing that strength alone would not solve this problem, Heracles employed his wit and managed to clean all the filth in a single day by diverting the waters of 2 nearby rivers through the stables. This achievement astonished everyone watching. Next, Heracles faced the Stymphalian birds. These vicious iron-feathered birds moved like arrows. Thanks to a special bronze rattle given by Athena, he flushed the birds from their hiding place and hunted them down with arrows from his bow.
His next labor was to capture the terrifying Cretan bull. Sent as a punishment to King Minos by Poseidon, Heracles engaged in a fierce struggle with this powerful creature and finally defeated it, bringing it safely to Eurystheus. The king was once again filled with fear at the sight of Heracles' strength. In another labor, Heracles set off for Thrace. Here he confronted and tamed the savage mares of King Diomedes. By feeding these creatures their cruel master, Heracles instantly tamed them, proving his courage once again, and delivered the horses safely to their destination. Next, Heracles embarked on a new adventure to retrieve the girdle of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. Initially, Hippolyta was willing to help him. However, due to Hera's trickery, distrust spread among the Amazons, and a violent battle erupted. Heracles, victorious in the conflict he reluctantly entered, seized the girdle and completed his task. The next arduous task required him to travel to the western edge of the universe to capture the cattle of Geryon. He defeated the triple-headed and triple-bodied Geryon in an epic battle and carefully drove the unruly herd back across mountains, rivers, and seas, returning triumphantly. One of the final labors was to gather the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. Despite the fact that the sleepless dragon named Ladon fiercely guarded this magical garden, Heracles achieved success through great difficulty, continuing his legend. Heracles devised a great plan to retrieve the legendary golden apples by cleverly tricking the mighty Titan Atlas, who carried the sky on his shoulders. When Atlas returned with the apples, he refused to take up the burden of the sky again. However, Heracles acted even more cunningly, persuading Atlas to shoulder the burden once more and managed to snatch the apples and escape. Heracles faced another challenging task, descending into the underworld. This time, he
he was required to bring back the three-headed dog, Cerberus, the guardian of Hades' kingdom, alive. Heracles bravely appeared before Hades, explained the situation, and promised to fight the beast using only his strength, without weapons. Under this condition, he captured Cerberus and brought him to the surface, completing the labor. Eurystheus, utterly terrified of Heracles, immediately had Cerberus safely returned to the underworld, thus bringing one of Heracles' greatest tasks to a successful conclusion. Elsewhere, a brave hero named Jason pursued the legend of the Golden Fleece. Jason, whose throne was usurped by his cruel uncle named Peleus, embarked on this adventure to prove he was the rightful heir to the kingdom of Iolcus. His uncle forced him to find the Golden Fleece, believing Jason would never return. But Jason was determined. He assembled a team of strong and skilled Argonauts and set sail. Among the heroes aboard the ship Argo were names like Heracles, the legendary musician Orpheus, the skilled huntress Atalanta, and the wise twins Castor and Pollux.
The Argonauts' voyage across the sea was filled with many dangerous adventures. They were saved from the mesmerizing songs of the deadly sirens by the music of Orpheus, and cleverly maneuvered through the massive, clashing rocks. Jason, to test the timing of their passage, sent a dove ahead, and thanks to his quick thinking, was able to steer the ship safely. Upon reaching Colchis, new trials awaited Jason and his crew. King Aeetes presented Jason with endless difficulties in his quest to obtain the Golden Fleece. However, here, Aeetes' daughter Medea, known for her mastery of sorcery, fell in love with Jason and decided to help him. Medea supported Jason in completing all the tasks. She gave him a magical ointment to protect him from fire-breathing bulls, and told him what to do against the deadly warriors born from the dragon's teeth he sowed. Jason used his wit to turn these warriors against each other, causing them to self-destruct. Finally, Jason reached the grove, seized the Golden Fleece, and reached the pinnacle of this legendary adventure. The Golden Fleece was a priceless treasure, carefully guarded by a giant, ever-wakeful dragon. Thanks to Medea's potent spells, this beast slowly slipped into a deep sleep, allowing Jason to act swiftly. As the golden wool shimmered brightly, Jason quickly seized his goal, and along with Medea and his crew, hurried toward the waiting ship, despite Aeetes' fierce pursuit. The Argonauts made a thrilling escape through stormy seas and dangerous waters, finally returning triumphantly to Iolcus. Jason, at the end of all these adventures, reclaimed the throne he rightfully deserved. However, as the intrigues of his treacherous uncle Peleus continued, the shared adventures of Medea and the other legendary heroes continued to shape their lives forever. The stories of heroes like Perseus, Theseus, Heracles, and Jason gradually transformed into legends that resonated in the tongues of the people over time. As these stories were told around countless campfires, listeners were captivated by the magic of courage, wit, and adventure. As time progressed,
This age of heroes, guided by the gods, gave way to more epic events. The glorious warriors of Greece emerged, kingdoms clashed on battlefields, and countless epics were written. Yet no struggle was as legendary and unforgettable as the Trojan War, which lasted for 10 years.
This epic war began for the love of one woman and the pride of mighty kings. The story originally sprouted during a joyous wedding celebration among the gods, the marriage of the mortal hero Peleus and the beautiful sea goddess Thetis. Almost everyone was invited to this event, except for the goddess Eris, discord. Eris, known for always causing trouble, in her anger at this exclusion, secretly crashed the celebration and rolled a golden apple across the floor. The words inscribed on this apple, "To the fairest," triggered an extremely dangerous competition. 3 mighty goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, fell into a major disagreement, each believing she deserved the apple. Zeus refused to be the judge of this critical contest, leaving the decision to Paris, who was living as a shepherd on Mount Ida, far from the serene royalty of Troy. Paris had been exiled from the Trojan palace by his father Priam at a young age, and was condemned to live a humble life. A prophecy had foretold that Paris would one day cause the destruction of his homeland, Troy. Thus he began to live in solitude, but peacefully in the mountains, playing music under the stars and tending to his flock of sheep. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite shattered his tranquil life with their beauty and promises. Each goddess offered unique promises to influence the young prince's decision. Hera promised him great power, offering to make him a mighty ruler admired by many kingdoms. Athena offered wisdom and superior skills that would make him invincible in war. But Aphrodite knew the deepest desire in Paris's heart and realized this would be the greatest factor in his decision. The most beautiful woman in the world possessed an aura that captivated everyone with her love. Her beauty radiated such a light that she eclipsed others without the slightest hesitation. Paris chose her, swayed by the promise of Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. However, there was a great story behind Paris's choice, one that unknowingly altered the destiny of thousands of people. This woman was Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. Her beauty had conquered the hearts not only of Greece, but of all time. Kings and warriors admired her charm.
When Paris arrived in Sparta, he was enthusiastically welcomed by Menelaus as a royal guest. During this time, empowered by Aphrodite, Helen instantly fell in love with the young Paris. Helen, unable to resist this powerful passion Paris inspired, embarked on a path that would change their destinies forever. Helen abandoned Sparta and set sail for Troy with Paris, leaving behind a furious and dishonored Menelaus. Menelaus moved to reclaim his wife and his dignity, appealing to the mighty king of Mycenae, his powerful brother, Agamemnon. Agamemnon, seeing this conflict as an opportunity to augment his own power, eagerly joined the war. A truly magnificent army was assembled. Kingdoms and heroes from different corners of Greece answered the call. Thousands of ships gathered on the shores and sailed across the Aegean towards Troy. Many distinguished warriors came to the forefront in this great campaign against Troy. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, famous for his intelligence and cunning, was among these heroes. Furthermore, Diomedes, known for his courage on the battlefield, was also noteworthy. But beyond them, the greatest warrior was the young Achilles. The son of Peleus and Thetis, Achilles had become almost invincible after his mother dipped him in the sacred river Styx. Yet his only vulnerable spot, his heel, was his weakness. When the Greeks arrived at Troy, they initiated a fierce siege. The struggles would prolong mercilessly, lasting for years, but neither side could gain the upper hand. Achilles, meanwhile, quickly became the most terrifying figure on the battlefields, striking fear into his enemies. However, his pride created tension within the Greek army. Agamemnon's seizure of Achilles' captive Briseis led to a major dispute. Feeling insulted, Achilles angrily withdrew from the battle and refused to participate in the struggle until his honor was restored. The Greek army suffered heavy losses. Meanwhile, Troy's honorable prince Hector was the pride of his father, King Priam. His courage and leadership made him the hero of his siblings and his people. He repeatedly repelled the Greeks. For the Trojan warriors, Hector was not just a leader, but a source of hope.
Hector's story transcended his identity as a warrior. He possessed the loyalty of a son, the love of a husband, and the affection of a father. While his loving wife Andromache and young son Astyanax anxiously watched the end of the war, Hector continued to protect his people. Leaving the city walls each day with the hope of returning safely, the gods could not remain neutral in the chaos of the war. Hera and Athena sided with the Greeks with all their might. On the other hand, Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares, still wounded by Paris's past judgment, sided with Troy, offering support, guidance, and directing the conflicts in battle. Zeus silently watched the tragic course of events. Torn by his internal conflicts, Hector undertook his duty and led a brave and powerful attack against the Greeks, despite knowing his inevitable fate. As the Trojan ranks dangerously approached the Greek ships, the Greeks realized they were in a desperate situation. It was then that Patroclus pleaded with Achilles for help. He tried to persuade Achilles to wear his armor
and instill fear in the Trojan army. Achilles reluctantly allowed Patroclus to fight bravely, only to learn that his friend's identity was quickly revealed. In a brutal clash, Hector killed Patroclus with his own hands, and for a brief moment mistook him for Achilles while stripping the armor on the battlefield. However, realizing the truth shortly thereafter, Hector understood that Achilles' vengeance would be swift. Devastated by the news of Patroclus' death, Achilles trembled with an indescribable pain and rage. These feelings dragged him back to the battlefield. Unstoppable in the heat of the battle, Achilles launched a powerful assault, scattering the Trojan army. Finally, he came face to face with Hector outside the great walls of Troy. Their duel continued with unparalleled ferocity. Even the brave and honorable Hector knew deep down that he could not withstand Achilles' rage. After a long and hopeless struggle, Achilles struck Hector down to avenge his slain friend Patroclus. But even this victory did not quench Achilles' fury. Dragging Hector's body behind his chariot around the walls was a severe insult to both the people of Troy and Hector's honor. This scene broke the hearts of everyone in Troy. Despite this tragedy, King Priam displayed incredible courage, secretly entering the Greek camp in the dead of night. The elderly king knelt before Achilles, weeping, and begged for the return of Hector's body.
Deeply shaken by Priam's sorrow, Achilles, despite the king's plea for the return of Hector's corpse, insisted on not allowing Hector's funeral to be mourned honorably. But the people of Troy refused to yield and continued to resist. Finally, against Troy, which refused to surrender, Odysseus, famous for his cunning intellect, devised an extraordinary plan. The Greeks retreated, giving the impression they were abandoning the war, leaving behind only one person. They left behind a gigantic wooden horse, which they claimed was an offering to Athena. Hidden inside this seemingly empty horse were elite Greek warriors, including Odysseus. That night, while the people of Troy were in a deep sleep, the wooden horse was jubilantly brought into the city as a symbol of spoils of war. Odysseus and his men, taking advantage of the darkness of the night, silently crept out of the horse and opened the city gates to the Greek army, which had secretly returned. With this move, Troy was utterly overthrown. Fires engulfed the city, and the crowded streets instantly surrendered to chaos. Fierce clashes erupted. Priam lost his life, Paris was killed, and the glorious city that had proudly resisted sieges for years was annihilated in just one night. Helen returned to Menelaus. Menelaus forgave her and took her back to Sparta. Meanwhile, those who survived Troy either tried to escape, were captured, or were dragged to a tragic end. Thus, the prophecies had come true, and the great city of Troy had succumbed to its fate. The heroic stories that had unfolded around Paris since his birth culminated at the intersection of courage and tragedy, and the world was forever changed. Achilles' wrath,
Hector's courage, Odysseus's wit, and the devastating consequences of the war made this grand epic a folktale told around campfires for generations. After the victory, the Greek heroes attempted to return to their homelands, but the disrespectful and terrifying acts committed during the sack of Troy enraged the gods. Violent storms, sent as a result of their wrath, scattered the Greek fleet. The journey home, especially for Odysseus, became a longer and more difficult trial than expected. Odysseus's travels transformed into an epic synonymous with his name. One of his first major struggles was being trapped with his men in the cave of the one-eyed monster Polyphemus. To escape the trap of this giant, known as the Cyclops, Odysseus devised a clever plan. After distracting the giant by introducing himself as nobody, he blinded Polyphemus with a burning stake. Although Polyphemus cried for help, the other Cyclopses ignored him, giving Odysseus's crew a chance to escape.
The adventures of Odysseus, who tried to escape the cave by clinging to the bellies of the giant sheep with his men, did not end there. As the difficulties they faced steadily increased, they had to confront the sorceress Circe, known for her magic. But despite all, Odysseus and his crew continued to struggle, crossing every obstacle to return home. With the help of Hermes, Odysseus prevented his men from being turned into pigs and protected himself against Circe's spells. Bravely confronting Circe, Odysseus managed to persuade her to free his men. After a year of rest and recovery on Circe's island, they set sail again. Guided by Circe, Odysseus journeyed to the underworld to speak with the prophet Tiserius. Tiserius offered him warnings and guidance about the challenges he would face ahead. His next great trial was resisting the mesmerizing songs of the sirens, whose beauty was deadly. Remembering Circe's advice, Odysseus protected his crew by stopping their ears with wax, shielding them from the sirens' voices. As for himself, he was tightly bound to the ship's mast and dared to listen to their songs, thus surviving this danger without jeopardizing his crew's lives. Later, Odysseus and his men were forced to choose between two dreadful dangers: Scylla, the six-headed sea monster, or Charybdis, the colossal whirlpool that swallowed everything. Choosing the lesser of two evils, Odysseus steered his ship closer to Scylla and, tragically, lost 6 brave sailors. However, he managed to save the lives of his ship and the rest of his crew. Following a grueling journey, struggling with hunger, the crew, despite all of Odysseus's warnings, slaughtered the sacred cattle on the island of the sun god Helios. This act drew the wrath of Helios upon them. Helios demanded vengeance from the god Zeus. Zeus, in turn, sent a violent storm, sinking the ship and ending the lives of the entire crew. Only Odysseus survived, and the waves carried him to the island of the goddess Calypso, who held him captive for 7 years. After long and solitary years, Odysseus was finally released by a divine command and returned to Ithaca. However, difficulties continued in his homeland. Arrogant suitors who had taken advantage of his prolonged absence had gathered in his palace to seize his kingdom and marry his loyal wife, Penelope.
With the help of Penelope, his son Telemachus, and a few loyal servants, Odysseus secretly made his plans, disguised as an old beggar. Penelope organized a contest to determine who would be her husband, asking the suitors to display perfect marksmanship with a mighty bow that only Odysseus could string. In his concealed true identity, Odysseus strung his bow and flawlessly sent the arrow to its target, initiating a tense confrontation amid the startled gazes of the suitors. Supported by Telemachus and his loyal friends, Odysseus vanquished the suitors, finally reclaiming his home and throne. With this epic return, he restored peace to Ithaca after 20 years of separation. Odysseus reunited with Penelope and his family, bringing an end to his tough journeys and adventures. The epic struggles of Achilles, Hector, and the other characters were complete. The heroic stories of the Trojan War continued to be told around countless campfires. These tales became a legacy, echoing the spirit of courage, wit, and struggle in the ancient world. These memories and legends would be remembered throughout the ages as one of Greece's most enduring and valuable legacies. However, the savagery and disrespect shown during the sack of Troy had enraged the gods. Consumed by anger, the gods scattered the Greek fleet with violent storms. Heroes faced years of hardship trying to return to their homelands. The one who endured the toughest trials was undoubtedly Odysseus. Odysseus's compelling adventures transformed into legends during his perilous journey. First, he and his men reached the island of the Lotus Eaters. There, the crew tasted the mystic lotus fruit, which caused them to forget their families and homes. Showing determined leadership, Odysseus struggled to drag his men, who had fallen into a realm of dreams, back onto the ship and continued the voyage. The adventure took a new form when they arrived at a magnificent yet dangerous island ruled by the sorceress Circe, the daughter of Helios. Circe invited the men into her palace and entertained them with food and drink. But behind this polite guise lay dark magic. With the touch of a simple wand, she transformed the crew into pigs. When one cautious man informed Odysseus of what had happened, Odysseus swore to rescue his men. In this critical moment, the messenger god Hermes gave Odysseus the magical moly plant, which would protect him against Circe's spells. Fearlessly confronting Circe, Odysseus compelled her to swear an oath to the gods that she would not harm him or his crew. Circe then restored his men to their human forms. Yet this adventure was not momentary. Odysseus and his crew stayed in Circe's palace for a year to regain both their strength and their morale. When the journey resumed, Circe helped once again. She guided him, instructing him to travel to Hades, the underworld. In the underworld, Odysseus encountered the wise, blind prophet Tiresias. The prophet showed him the safe path back to Ithaca and warned him about the many dangers he would face along the way. Specifically, he pointed to the great trial of not harming Helios's sacred cattle.
Returning from the underworld, a dark danger awaited Odysseus and his crew, the sirens. The enchanting but deadly songs of these creatures had lured many sailors to the rocks and to their doom. But remembering Circe's advice, Odysseus stopped his men's ears with beeswax. As for himself, he wished to hear the siren's song. For this reason, he commanded his men to tie him tightly to the mast. Following these severe trials, the journey, filled with memories that had become legends, took one more arduous but glorious step toward the return to Ithaca. Odysseus struggled for pleasure, pleading desperately, but his loyal men bound him tighter. In this way, they successfully completed their task without harm from the deadly bait and continued their journey safely. Among the rocks, a terrifying creature named Scylla posed a threat. Stationed high above the water, instantly snatching and destroying sailors with her 6 powerful heads. On the opposite side was Charybdis, a mighty whirlpool that sucked ships into its depths. Odysseus chose to pass by Scylla to incur fewer losses, but this choice still had tragic consequences. He quickly lost 6 brave crewmen, witnessing their demise. Although heartbroken and pained, he resolutely continued his journey. Finally, exhausted and hungry, he and his crew reached the island of Helios. Here, they were in the domain of the powerful sun god, where sacred cattle that must never be harmed resided. Odysseus warned his crew repeatedly, reminding them to avoid angering Helios and to shelter from the approaching storms. However, in desperation and with supplies depleted, the crew made an inexplicable decision and slaughtered some of the sacred cattle. This disrespect deeply angered Helios, and he appealed to Zeus for justice. Zeus responded sternly to this irreverence, creating a mighty storm that utterly destroyed the ship. Odysseus managed to survive by clinging to the shattered wreckage. After drifting on the sea, he washed ashore and found himself on the island of the beautiful goddess Calypso. Initially, he was warmly welcomed, but over time, he realized that Calypso harbored a deep love for him. The goddess offered him immortality and eternal happiness if he stayed on the island. However, Odysseus's heart longed only for Ithaca, his home and Penelope. For 7 years on Calypso's island, where he was held captive, he constantly gazed at the sea, longing and dreaming of his home. Finally, Athena pleaded with Zeus for help, and Zeus commanded Calypso to release Odysseus. Reluctantly fulfilling the command, the goddess provided him with materials to build a raft and necessary supplies for his journey. Thus, after a long and solitary voyage, Odysseus was set free to return to his homeland, Ithaca. However, his struggles did not end with his return. Arrogant suitors had seized his palace during his absence, holding feasts on his wealth and pursuing Penelope. His loyal wife, Penelope, cleverly stalled her suitors, gained time by secretly unraveling the shroud she wove during the night.
guided by Athena, Odysseus, disguised as an old beggar, made his plans in silence while awaiting his return home. He secretly met with his son, and they devised strategies to overthrow the suitors. During this time, Telemachus had grown into a strong and determined young man. Penelope decided to organize a clever contest to find her true husband, a stipulation that the person who could string Odysseus's mighty bow would win the right to marry her. But none of the arrogant suitors possessed the skill to string this bow. It was then that Odysseus, disguised as an old beggar, managed to effortlessly string the bow in front of everyone, and demonstrated his skill by flawlessly shooting the arrow through a line of axe handles. With this extraordinary display, Odysseus cast aside his disguise, revealed his true identity, and, together with his son, vanquished the suitors. The palace servants and loyal friends watched the return of the true king in admiration. After this 20-year separation, Odysseus finally reclaimed his palace and his family. Penelope presented one more test to confirm his true identity. Passing the test successfully, Odysseus reunited with Penelope, embracing each other in tears of joy. The palace was now a place where love and peace reigned. Thus, Odysseus's long journey was complete. This grand adventure turned into a legend thanks to his struggles against monsters, the use of his wit against the gods, and his superhuman efforts. His courage and determination inspired stories that would be told for generations. This enshrined tale of heroism lived on as one of the cornerstones of Greek culture, and over time became one of the most frequently recounted epics, alongside legends like Achilles' wrath and Hector's bravery. Throughout history, Greek culture was also enriched by mythological love stories. One of the most striking examples was the story of Psyche and Eros. The unparalleled beauty of Psyche, a mortal, was renowned. Travelers from distant lands would embark on journeys simply to behold her face. Her beauty turned into a rumor that suggested she surpassed even Aphrodite, and the temples dedicated to Aphrodite began to be abandoned. People had now elevated Psyche to the status of a goddess.
Aphrodite could not accept this situation, and in anger, she devised a jealous plan. She summoned her son, Eros, and asked him to shoot an arrow at Psyche to make her fall in love with the ugliest creature. The loyal son obeyed, secretly sneaking into Psyche's room at night. But when he saw her, he was enchanted. He was stunned by the beauty and grace of Psyche sleeping under the moonlight. In the magic of that moment, he accidentally pricked himself with his own arrow and instantly found himself desperately in love with Psyche. Realizing he could not harm her in any way, he flew away without touching her. However, he could not forget her in the process. Psyche's family, meanwhile, was worried that no one dared to marry her. Psyche was so uniquely beautiful that the family consulted an oracle to understand the situation. The oracle told them that Psyche's destiny was to marry a creature feared by all, who was neither human nor god. Upon this, her family led Psyche to a distant cliff, trying to convince her that they could not change the flow of fate. However, Psyche was gently lifted by Zephyrus, the west wind, and safely carried to a hidden valley full of flowers and gardens. There she found a magnificent palace adorned with gold and jewels, more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Invisible servants fulfilled all her wishes that night. In the darkness of the night, her mysterious husband visited her without being seen by Psyche. She could only hear his soft voice and found solace in his words. Although she found peace in her husband's loving words every night, Psyche gradually grew curious because she could not see his face. She was deeply in love with her husband, but loneliness also gripped her heart. When she wished to see her sisters, she invited them to her palace. However, seeing the palace's splendor, her sisters were overcome with jealousy and planted seeds of doubt in Psyche's mind. Confused by her sister's instigation, Psyche began to think her husband must be a monstrous creature, terrifying enough to hide his face. Her curiosity gradually merged with anxiety, then fear. Determined to learn the truth, one night, when her husband was in deep sleep, Psyche took an oil lamp and carefully held the light to his face. But what she saw was not what she expected. Instead of a monster, the incredibly handsome god of love, Eros, lay before her. She was breathless at this sight, yet she accidentally spilled hot oil from the lamp onto the floor, and it splashed onto Eros's shoulder.
Waking up in pain, Eros felt betrayed and flew away without uttering a single word. With his departure, Psyche was left alone and devastated. Desperate to win Eros back, she turned to Aphrodite, begging for help to be forgiven. But Aphrodite was still furious and decided that Psyche needed to prove her love. With that, she imposed on her arduous tasks that seemed almost impossible. In the first task, Psyche had to sort a gigantic pile of small grains, which seemed impossible. But helpful ants took pity on her and secretly assisted her in completing the task. In the next task, Aphrodite commanded her to collect golden wool from savage and dangerous sheep. Psyche cried by the riverside, unsure of what to do this time. Then a group of whispering reeds advised her to collect the wool caught on the thorny bushes, and she succeeded thanks to this advice. Next, Aphrodite demanded water be brought from the river Styx, guarded by dangerous dragons. Psyche was on the verge of giving up when an eagle sent by Zeus came to her aid and collected the water for her. Another task required her to go to the underworld. She had to bring back a box filled with beauty from Persephone. Courageously setting out, Psyche completed this difficult mission as well, thanks to the advice given by the spirits.
Gathering her courage to request a box full of beauty from Persephone, she embarked on the journey with the advice of the spirits. But on her way back, she succumbed to curiosity and opened the box, instantly falling into a deep sleep akin to death. Somewhere far away, Eros sensed her desperate state. His heart still full of love, Eros quickly flew towards her and gently woke her with a compassionate kiss. Seeing this pure love, Zeus himself intervened and offered her ambrosia, the food of the gods, granting immortality to her soul. They welcomed her to Mount Olympus, inviting her to an eternal life. Finally, her soul and Eros were reunited in a love stronger than ever. The gods celebrated this great love, and the story of Eros and Psyche began to live on as a gentle reminder that true love can overcome all obstacles. However, not every love story on earth ends so joyfully. Consider the heartbreaking tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, a story passed down through generations, reminding everyone of both the captivating power and the unbearable tragedy of love. Orpheus was not ordinary musician. He was considered one of the greatest in Greece and was the son of the muse Calliope and immortal king of Thrace. He played so beautifully that his music was impressive enough to almost make the world pause and listen. His melodies enchanted birds, soothed wild beasts, and even silenced the flowing rivers. People traveled from afar just to hear his voice, believing his music was a gift from the gods.
Eurydice was an elegant young woman whose heart was as gentle as Orpheus's melodies. The moment Orpheus first saw her, he instantly knew he would never love anyone else. Eurydice felt the same, and they soon married in a wedding crowned with happiness. In the celebration, filled with songs and laughter, everyone sincerely believed they would be happy together for a long life. But fate prevented them from this. The day after the wedding, Eurydice was peacefully walking in a meadow with her friends, gathering flowers and laughing joyfully. It was then that a snake, which had secretly crept near, suddenly bit her heel. The lethal venom spread rapidly. Eurydice's laughter was replaced by silence. Her friends rushed to her, but it was too late. Eurydice had passed away. Eurydice's tragic death spread a wave of deep sorrow through the village, and Orpheus was lost in an inexpressible agony. Nothing was precious without her. He stopped touching his music, and his silence filled the air. Birds no longer sang, rivers did not flow with joy, and even the wind stopped whispering through the trees. With his unbearable pain, Orpheus decided to do something no one had dared to do. He set off to go to the underworld to bring back his beloved. Orpheus, with only his golden lyre in hand, bravely stepped into the darkness. Determined to reclaim his beloved Eurydice, he crossed the river Styx and quietly passed by the terrifying three-headed Cerberus, who guarded the gates of the underworld. Cerberus, normally fierce and vigilant, was soothed
by Orpheus's mournful melodies. As Orpheus dared to go further on his dark path, with the soft and heartfelt tunes rising from his lyre, every soul wandering the underworld forgot their sorrows for a moment and listened to this mesmerizing music. The unique sweetness of the melodies finally brought Orpheus before Hades and Persephone, the rulers of the underworld. In this dark and solemn throne room, the rulers watched Orpheus from behind their icy, serious gazes. Orpheus, summoning all his courage, channeled the echoes of the deep longing in his heart onto the strings of his lyre. As his music reverberated through the stone walls of the underworld, Hades, for the first time, was moved to tears by the warmth of undying love. Persephone quietly wept, affected by the sincere music and the passion within their love. Hades agreed to something he had never done before. He permitted Eurydice's soul to be released. However, there was only one condition. Eurydice would follow Orpheus silently, and Orpheus was not to look back until both reached the surface. If Orpheus violated this condition for even a moment, Eurydice would be lost forever.
This difficult yet hopeful journey began. With every step, Orpheus's heart wavered between love and doubt, while Eurydice's silently trailed behind him. They carefully walked through the shadowy passages on the way out to the sun. As the end of the journey neared, Orpheus saw the faint sunlight ahead, a sign of freedom and light. But a sudden fear flooded his mind. Was Eurydice really there? Could he have been tricked? Overwhelmed by this doubt and longing, in a moment of instant desperation, he turned around. In that instant, their eyes met. There was both love and sorrow in Eurydice's gaze. She softly whispered Orpheus's name, but as her words were still in the air, her body began to fade. As her soul slowly receded into the dark shadows, Orpheus desperately stretched out his hand, trying to hold her, but it was too late. Eurydice had vanished again into eternal darkness. Orpheus, devastated by endless grief, returned to the earth's surface from the underworld. But his heart remained trapped in the underworld with his beloved Eurydice. From that day on, he wandered alone, his music carrying a feeling of lament mixed with longing. He was filled with such deep sorrow and yearning that even the trees and rivers wept, accompanying his songs. When his life came to an end, Orpheus's soul willingly returned to the underworld. There, he finally found peace. He was reunited with Eurydice, never to be separated again. They walked side by side in the silent, shadowy meadows, and their love achieved an uninterrupted eternity in the afterlife. The Trojan War began with a love story that ignited another tragedy. The union of Helen and Paris, sealed by the enchanting power of Aphrodite, became a turning point that led kingdoms to ruin and eternally changed the history of Greece. The story was shaped when Paris of Troy served as a judge in a beauty contest between three powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. While each goddess offered Paris tempting rewards, Aphrodite presented the most irresistible gift, the love of the world's most beautiful woman, Helen.
Paris gave the golden apple to Aphrodite as the prize. During Paris's visit to Sparta, Queen Helen was dazzlingly moved by emotion in his presence through Aphrodite's magic. With a beauty that had conquered countless hearts, Helen developed a captivating passion for the young Paris. She chose to leave her husband Menelaus, the king of Sparta, behind. When Menelaus learned of this, his fury peaked, and he decided to fight to reclaim Helen. Together with his brother Agamemnon, he mobilized the mighty kings of Greece, assembling a colossal army. Thousands of ships sailed toward Troy, and thus the sweet beginning of love transformed into a ruthless, long-drawn-out war.
This war was a catastrophe that destroyed not only kingdoms, but also the lives of heroes. Paris and Helen began to live in a fragile dream, surrounded by tragedy. Although their love deepened within the walls of Troy, their passion was constantly under the shadow of war. Helen frequently climbed to the top of the city walls, gazed at the magnitude of the Greek army, and bore the weight of knowing that every warrior was fighting because of her. In sadness, weighed down by guilt and resignation, she watched the transformation of her own destiny. Everything became more difficult as memories wandered in the depths of her dreams, and her love for Paris became a bittersweet solace. Paris, who possessed magnificent yet burning beauty, was so deeply devoted to Helen that this bond, while bringing them closer, simultaneously caused them to be crushed under the harsh burden of fate. Helen often struggled under the burden of a bond, similar to a syndicate, that made her feel the weight of her love and the choices they had made. The people of Troy attributed the source of the war that was devastating their lives to Helen's impulsive choice for Paris, laying the blame for the suffering upon her. Despite all the criticisms, doubts, and incessant losses, Paris never compromised his loyalty, refusing to give up on Helen even in moments when everything seemed hopeless. However, this bond also ended tragically. When the poisonous arrow shot by the Greek hero Philoctetes struck Paris in the chaotic turmoil of the war, the lovers' devotion continued until the edge of death. Helen remained by his side as Paris succumbed in his final moments, bidding him farewell with her tears. Helen's sorrow enveloped the whole city, as if it were heavier than the crumbling walls and raised gates of Troy. When Troy finally fell, the emptiness Helen felt in her heart was greater than the city's wreckage. Menelaus finally approached her to confront his lost wife amidst the ruins. He had raised his sword towards her, ready to attack, but when he looked into Helen's eyes, his wrath yielded to the old love that still flared within him. His sword dropped to the ground as he silently embraced her. This love between them covered up all the chaos and pain they had caused together. The two returned to Sparta, but what remained of that love was not enough to erase the scars of the losses endured. Yet none in history can surpass the narrative of two young lovers, the story of Pyramus and Thisbe. The passions of these two tragic lovers became the subject of stories and legends for centuries. These two neighbors, living in Babylon, were separated by nothing more than a wall, but even that thin barrier prevented them from physically uniting. Thanks to a crack in that wall, they shared their feelings and whispered their secrets. They loved each other deeply, deprived of even being able to clearly see each other, let alone touch each other.
However, since their families were ancient enemies, they were not allowed to openly unite, and their love had turned into a forbidden relationship. Intolerant of the separation, Pyramus and Thisbe made a courageous plan to elope together. They decided to meet after dark outside the city walls, beneath a large mulberry tree whose fruits were ripe. Thisbe was the first to secretly slip out of her home and reach the meeting point. Her heart was pounding fast, influenced by both excitement and fear as she waited there. But at that very moment, a lioness suddenly emerged from the shadows. Her jaws were stained red with the blood dripping from a fresh kill. Terrified, Thisbe quickly took shelter in a nearby cave, but as she ran, she dropped the shawl she was carrying. A lioness sniffed the veil, tore it with her bloodied teeth, and walked away. A few minutes later, Pyramus found the torn and blood-stained veil next to the mulberry tree. This sight deeply wounded his heart. Believing his beloved Thisbe had perished in such a manner, feelings of desperation and guilt grew within him. Wrestling with grief and agony, Pyramus drew his sword and took his own life. Thisbe felt she could not bear to live without her beloved. She was still trembling with fear as she came out of her hiding spot near the mulberry tree. Returning to the meeting place in the pale moonlight, she saw Pyramus lying on the ground in a pool of blood. The roots of the mulberry tree were stained with his blood. Kneeling beside him, she burst into tears, accompanying her beloved in his final moments. Unable to endure her own sorrow, she took the same sword and chose to unite with Pyramus in death. As they drew their last breaths, their blood mingled, seeping into the earth, and eternally changed the color of the mulberry fruits from white to deep crimson. This red remained as an everlasting memory of their love and heartbreaking sacrifice. Such powerful tales of love and loss left profound impacts on everyone who listened throughout history. Eros showcased the power of love, while the story of Orpheus and Eurydice revealed the depth of the pain of separation. Helen and Paris embodied the destructive effects of love, while the fate of Pyramus and Thisbe, succumbing to misfortune, highlighted the tragic consequences of forbidden desire and misunderstanding.
At this point, we can journey into the depths of the mysterious realm that the ancient Greeks called the underworld. This shadowy kingdom was ruled by the solemn god Hades and the gentle yet distant queen Persephone. For the Greeks, this place was neither a distant heaven nor an unreachable realm. It was seen as a physical realm located beneath everyone's feet. However, only the chosen could access it, and many feared it. Unlike the other Olympian gods, Hades, known for his silence and seriousness, was typically depicted as a dark-bearded figure seated on an ebony throne. People were reluctant to speak his name aloud, and he was more often referred to as Pluto or Hades, meaning the unseen one. Though he did not have the appearance of an evil god, he was a fair, resolute, and balanced figure. Unlike his brother Zeus, who ruled the sky, and Poseidon, who ruled the seas, Hades was dedicated to maintaining order in the realm of the dead. His isolated life was spent rarely stepping onto Mount Olympus. He was surrounded by silence and shadows. His duty required patience and impartiality. He established a silent authority over the souls, ensuring that each individual reached their deserved place in the afterlife. Although his role seemed challenging, the Greeks viewed him as someone vested with the authority to judge fairly after death. It was believed that he ensured the actions performed in life were justly evaluated. Punishments and rewards were dispensed according to the choices made in one's life, and this solemn god, who balanced the realm of the dead, was considered the representative of justice. As one of the many tales in Greek mythology, this narrative directly centers on Hades, and though few in number, his stories manage to leave a highly influential impact over time. Particularly noteworthy, and perhaps the most prominent, was Hades' union with Persephone. Persephone, the graceful goddess of spring, desired to experience a journey with Hades, captivated by his allure. However, this decision was not easily made. While Hades won her love, he acted with Zeus's hesitant approval. Zeus neither openly supported nor directly opposed this marriage. Hades accepted this silence as a positive endorsement.
One afternoon, as Persephone joyfully wandered through a meadow, the ground suddenly began to tremble. A dark chariot, pulled by black horses, swiftly ascended from the underworld. Hades took Persephone from the earth and brought her to his own world in the blink of an eye. Initially terrified, the goddess soon began to accept and even internalize her destiny as the queen of the underworld. Although it was a dark and silent realm, Persephone softened this cold world with her own grace. With her compassionate touch, she brought a measure of life to the underworld. She made flowers bloom by the riverbanks and offered small but meaningful consolations to the souls there. Even though their relationship was complex and at times melancholic, the Greeks believed Persephone had a deep affection for her husband. Her presence brought peace and warmth to the frigidity of Hades' palace. The underworld was an eternal landscape, not static after death, but filled with mystery. The journey of the souls began by passing through winding passages and shadowy tunnels, where the ferryman named Charon awaited them on the banks of the river Styx. A small coin, carefully placed under the tongue by their loved ones, was required for the souls to cross these dark waters. Those without the fee were condemned to wander hopelessly on the riverbanks. Charon performed his duty without allowing any sentimentality. This gloomy figure, wearing tattered robes from ancient times and whose eyes glowed like extinguished embers, carried the souls to the other side of the river Styx. The massive gates, impossible to approach, were guarded by Cerberus. Cerberus, a gigantic three-headed dog, both prevented the unauthorized entry of the living into the underworld and stopped any soul from escaping to the mortal world. His terrifying presence was there to remind everyone that the underworld was a point of no return. This realm, ruled by Hades, was encircled by endless mystery. The landscape spread across foggy valleys, forests draped in shadows, and melancholic plains where souls wandered aimlessly, attempting to melt away in time and be relieved of the burden of their memories. Between the plains of asphodel filled with contemplation and the vast gray fields, ordinary souls drifted. Those who had neither extraordinary success nor catastrophic failure in their lives rested here.
The underworld preserved its eternal boundary in a way that was both daunting and unsettling, as the final passage between the living and the dead. Eternal good and evil were experienced in a silent neutrality. However, the Greeks also spoke of hero souls and true souls going to brighter or darker realms within Hades' kingdom. The most beautiful place known for virtuous souls was Elysium, or the Elysian Fields. Covered with fragrant flowers and golden hues, filled with gentle breezes, this place was considered the home of peace, rest, and joy. Here, heroes like Hector, Achilles, or Heracles, souls who performed great deeds against the gods, achieved eternal freedom from pain, sorrow, and fear in the sunlight. But there was also Tartarus, which inspired deep fear. This abyss, even below Hades' palace, was filled with eternal darkness and never-ending punishments. Famous prisoners who challenged or offended the gods among the Titans and mortals endured their sentences here. For example, Sisyphus was condemned to eternally push a boulder uphill in an endless cycle, only for the stone to roll down again each time. Tantalus remained forever hungry and thirsty due to fruit branches that receded whenever he reached for them and water that moved away. Another punished soul, Ixion, was chained to a perpetually flaming spinning wheel. According to Greek mythology, a number of other elements also existed in this mysterious underworld. For instance, the river Lethe symbolized forgetfulness. Souls shed their worldly sorrows and regrets in its waters. Acheron, the river of woe, was nourished by the tears and grief of newly arrived souls and flowed at the border of the underworld. On the other side, the river Phlegethon, which flowed along the edges of Tartarus, burned, empowering the eternal punishment. In the underworld, there were not only rivers, but also symbolic structures and eerie areas. Hades' palace was an exciting and magnificent structure built from dark stones and metals. It was illuminated by blue flames, while sacred groves of dark willows and poplars stretched around the palace where constant whispers echoed. Nearby, the scale of justice was turning. 3 impartial judges named Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchus examined the actions of each soul performed in life and determined an appropriate afterlife for them. These judgments assigned the eternal places of the souls.
For the Greeks, the underworld was not merely a realm of fear, but also represented the complexity of life and the reflection of moral balance. To them, Hades was not evil, but a stern yet essential element of balance. Impartial yet fair, Hades sustained the truth even after death. The underworld taught them that life and death were tightly bound. They approached the endless cycle with a deep respect, even though it was never fully understood. As the fire crackled softly and the stars watched them, they admired this intricate order. Every thought about the great secret of the universe was woven with reverence. Let us journey into the depths of Greek mythology's lesser-known tales, stories that remind us of kindness and humility. In these narratives, where the voice is conveyed not with elevated loudness, but with whispers of wisdom, let us discover the hidden magic within simple lives. We begin this journey with the story of Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple remembered for their simplicity and generosity. They lived in a humble hut with wooden walls and a thatched roof, nestled in a small village surrounded by field, trees, and simple country lanes. They may not have been rich in material wealth, but they led a life profoundly rich in compassion and hospitality. Their life was simple but full. They tended to vegetables in their garden, and herbs and colorful flowers adorned their surroundings. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, enjoying their plain but peaceful life. One afternoon, two strangers arrived in the village. Dressed in simple clothes, appearing tired from a long journey, these individuals were none other than Zeus, the king of the gods, and Hermes, the messenger god, in human disguise. They knocked on every door in the village, seeking shelter and food, but every door was slammed shut in their faces. Finally, they reached the humble dwelling of Baucis and Philemon. The elderly couple invited them inside without any hesitation. Baucis quickly prepared a feast, while Philemon placed chairs by the fireplace. They offered their visitors fresh bread, fruit with honey, and some wine. Though they apologized for not being able to offer anything better, the guests were utterly pleased with the warm welcome.
As time passed, and they conversed and shared their meal, both the hosts and the guests noticed something strange. No matter how much wine they poured, the pitcher never seemed to empty. Following this extraordinary event, they exchanged glances, realizing their guests were no ordinary people. The elderly couple was filled with astonishment and admiration. Soon after, Zeus and Hermes revealed their true identities. Upon this, Baucis and Philemon knelt with great respect, offering their gratitude to the gods. Zeus praised their sincere kindness and generosity. However, he declared that the villagers would be punished for their lack of hospitality and that the village would soon face a great flood. Nevertheless, the gods promised that Baucis and Philemon would be spared and offered them one wish. The elderly couple seized this opportunity in a simple yet profound way. They wished only to live together until the end of their lives, and to depart from this world at the very same moment when their time came. Thus, neither of them would ever be left alone by the other. Zeus accepted their heartfelt wish and gladly granted it. He told them to climb a nearby hill, and when they turned back, they watched as the floodwaters engulfed the village. Their small hut had now become an extraordinarily beautiful place. The temple of Baucis and Philemon warmly welcomed visitors as its devoted keepers. For years they lived in peace, establishing an order where everything was calm. But one day, while standing outside the temple, they felt their bodies slowly rooting into the earth. Baucis transformed into a linden tree, and Philemon into an oak tree. Their branches intertwined, reaching for each other, united in an embrace for eternity. The villagers often visited these two trees, recounting stories of their past. The rustling leaves served as a reminder of the kindness and generosity that defined the lives of Baucis and Philemon. But now, the story turns in a different direction. The tale of King Midas. Midas ruled the ancient kingdom of Phrygia, famous for its rich and fertile lands. Despite his great fortune, Midas's endless desire for gold, which filled his surroundings with luxurious treasures, seemed insatiable. One day, Midas's servants noticed an elderly and lost man named Silenus wandering near the palace. Silenus, a friend and mentor of Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and revelry, had become separated from Dionysus's entourage and was wearily wandering alone.
Midas's servants immediately realized that Silenus was an important person and brought him back to the palace. King Midas welcomed Silenus warmly, and he was cared for with great attention for several days. Comfortable rooms were provided, and delicious food and fine wines were offered. Midas did everything in his power to ensure the comfort of this close friend of Dionysus, whom the god held dear. When Dionysus learned of these events, he wished to thank King Midas of Phrygia for his generosity. The god arrived at the palace shortly thereafter, expressed his deep gratitude to Midas, and granted him one wish. "You may choose anything you desire," Dionysus said, rewarding Midas. "I shall fulfill your wish without hesitation." Midas could not hide his excitement and wished that everything he touched would instantly turn into pure gold. Dionysus, considering the potential consequences of this request, warned Midas to reconsider his decision. But Midas was swept away by his excitement and paid no heed to Dionysus's words. Against Midas's insistence, Dionysus took a deep breath and granted his wish, offering a silent warning that gifts are often not as innocent as they seem. The new ability revealed itself immediately. Midas touched a wooden chair, and the chair instantly transformed into shining gold. With this power, he began to run through the palace gardens with great joy. As he touched flowers, plants, and stones, everything turned into sparkling gold. At first, this situation gave Midas an indescribable joy. He saw himself as the luckiest person in the world. However, this euphoria soon gave way to anxiety. Midas faced the bitter reality when he sat down for his meal. He tried to bring a piece of fresh bread to his mouth, but the bread turned into pure gold the moment it touched his lips. Disappointed and astonished, he tried to sip water from a cup, but the water similarly turned into gold. Soon, everything on the table became a useless pile of metal to him. As he tried to realize what he had done, in a panic, his beloved daughter entered the room. Unaware of her father's strange behavior, she approached him, trying to comfort him.
But Midas, embracing his daughter with fatherly love, watched in horror as she also turned into a golden statue. Now in despair, Midas understood that this wish was actually a terrible curse. He began to beg Dionysus. He prayed day and night for forgiveness and for the tragedy to be undone. Dionysus, seeing his contrite heart, appeared before him and took pity on Midas, realizing he had understood his mistake.
Dionysus, showing mercy, told Midas to go to the river Pactolus in Phrygia. There, he could rid himself of the curse by washing his hands and body in the clear waters. Midas rushed toward the riverbank without wasting any time and desperately performed the ritual of purification, plunging his hands into the water to be freed from the golden touch. He was freed from his curse by diving into the cool water while washing himself and regained his human nature. He rushed back to his palace and found his daughter in her normal state, seeing that the curse had been reversed. That day, the sands of the river Pactolus shimmered gently with tiny grains of gold. This sight served as a reminder of the painful lesson learned by King Midas about the true values of life. Despite the allure of gold, the value of love and the simple joys of life was far greater. Now let us speak of Chiron, a centaur who was different from others in Greek mythology. Centaurs were generally known for their wild nature, particularly their fondness for wine, in addition to their half-human, half-horse appearance. However, Chiron was quite different from the rest. He was born from the union of the Titan Cronus and the nymph Philyra, and this lineage granted him a unique calmness and wisdom unlike others. Unlike the other centaurs, he was not a troublemaker who wandered aimlessly in the forests. He established a quiet life for himself on Mount Pelion, known for its peaceful hills in Thessaly. Living in a simple cave amidst the forests and clear mountain streams, he gathered his knowledge and created a home where he could pass it on to others. Chiron possessed great wisdom in the fields of medicine, astronomy, hunting, music, and prophecy. He became a guide whom the heroes and leaders of ancient Greece consulted with respect. Rulers, gods, and goddesses held a deep respect for his justice and intellect. Many legendary heroes came to Mount Pelion to study, seeking Chiron's guidance. Among the most famous of these was Achilles. Achilles was one of Chiron's most special students. Under Chiron's mentorship, the young warrior learned the arts of war, hunting, and healing, as well as grasping the meaning of courage and compassion.
Another famous student of Chiron was Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, who sought the Golden Fleece. He guided him in learning teamwork and fostered loyalty on his path to leadership. Perseus, who learned to make decisions calmly in moments of danger and to trust himself from Chiron, went on to defeat Medusa and make history. However, his most well-known relationship was with Heracles. Heracles, known by many as Hercules, became legendary for his incredible strength, wit, and skills.
Yet he frequently visited Chiron for advice and training. During each visit, the centaur sincerely welcomed him, opening the doors of his wisdom wide. As the fire crackled softly and the stars watched them, they admired this complex order. Every thought about the great secret of the universe was woven with reverence. Let us embark on a journey into the depths of Greek mythology's lesser-known tales, stories that remind us of kindness and humility. In these narratives, where the voice is conveyed not with elevated loudness, but with whispers of wisdom, let us discover the hidden magic within simple lives. We begin this journey with the story of the elderly couple, Baucis and Philemon, remembered for their simplicity and generosity. They lived in a humble hut with wooden walls and a thatched roof, nestled in a small village surrounded by field trees and simple country lanes. They may not have been rich in material wealth, but they led a life profoundly rich in compassion and hospitality. Their life was simple but full. They tended to vegetables in their garden, and herbs and colorful flowers adorned their surroundings. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, enjoying their plain but peaceful life. One afternoon, two strangers arrived in the village. Dressed in simple clothes, appearing tired from a long journey, these individuals were none other than Zeus, the king of the gods, and Hermes, the messenger god, in human disguise. They knocked on every door in the village, seeking shelter and food, but every door was slammed shut in their faces. Finally, they reached the humble dwelling of Baucis and Philemon.
The elderly couple invited them inside without any hesitation. Baucis quickly prepared a feast, while Philemon placed chairs by the fireplace. They offered their visitors fresh bread, fruit with honey, and some wine. Though they apologized for not being able to offer anything better, the guests were utterly pleased with the warm welcome. As time passed and they conversed and shared their meal, both the hosts and the guests noticed something strange. No matter how much wine they poured, the pitcher never seemed to empty. Following this extraordinary event, they exchanged glances, realizing their guests were no ordinary people. The elderly couple was filled with astonishment and admiration. Soon after, Zeus and Hermes revealed their true identities. Upon this, Baucis and Philemon knelt with great respect, offering their gratitude to the gods. Zeus praised their sincere kindness and generosity. However, he declared that the villagers would be punished for their lack of hospitality, and that the village would soon face a great flood. Nevertheless, the gods promised that Baucis and Philemon would be spared and offered them one wish. The elderly couple seized this opportunity in a simple yet profound way. They wished only to live together until the end of their lives, and to depart from this world at the very same moment when their time came. Thus, neither of them would ever be left alone by the other. Zeus accepted their heartfelt wish and gladly granted it. He told them to climb a nearby hill, and when they turned back,
They watched as the floodwaters engulfed the village. Their small hut had now become an extraordinarily beautiful place. The temple of Baucis and Philemon warmly welcomed visitors as its devoted keepers. For years, they lived in peace, establishing an order where everything was calm. But one day, while standing outside the temple, they felt their bodies slowly rooting into the earth. Baucis transformed into a linden tree, and Philemon into an oak tree. Their branches intertwined, reaching for each other, united in an embrace for eternity. The villagers often visited these two trees, recounting stories of their past. The rustling leaves served as a reminder of the kindness and generosity that defined the lives of Baucis and Philemon. But now the story turns in a different direction. The tale of King Midas. Midas ruled the ancient kingdom of Phrygia, famous for its wealth and fertile lands. Despite his great fortune, Midas's endless desire for gold, which filled his surroundings with luxurious treasures, seemed insatiable. One day, Midas's servants noticed an elderly and lost man named Silenus wandering near the palace. Silenus, a friend and mentor of Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and revelry, had become separated from Dionysus's entourage and was wearily wandering alone.
Midas's servants immediately realized that Silenus was an important person and brought him back to the palace. King Midas welcomed Silenus warmly, and he was cared for with great attention for several days. Comfortable rooms were provided, and delicious food and fine wines were offered. Midas did everything in his power to ensure the comfort of this close friend of Dionysus, whom the god held dear. When Dionysus learned of these events, he wished to thank King Midas of Phrygia for his generosity. The god arrived at the palace shortly thereafter, expressed his deep gratitude to Midas, and granted him one wish. "You may choose anything you desire," Dionysus said, rewarding Midas. "I shall fulfill your wish without hesitation." Midas could not hide his excitement and wished that everything he touched would instantly turn into pure gold. Dionysus, considering the potential consequences of this request, warned Midas to reconsider his decision. But Midas was swept away by his excitement and paid no heed to Dionysus's words. Against Midas's insistence, Dionysus took a deep breath and granted his wish, offering a silent warning that gifts are often not as innocent as they seem. The new ability revealed itself immediately. Midas touched a wooden chair, and the chair instantly transformed into shining gold. With this power, he began to run through the palace gardens with great joy. As he touched flowers, plants, and stones, everything turned into sparkling gold. At first, this situation gave Midas an indescribable joy. He saw himself as the luckiest person in the world. However, this euphoria soon gave way to anxiety. Midas faced the bitter reality when he sat down for his meal. He tried to bring a piece of fresh bread to his mouth, but the bread turned into pure gold the moment it touched his lips. Disappointed and astonished, he tried to sip water from a cup, but the water similarly turned into gold.
Soon everything on the table became a useless pile of metal to him. As he tried to realize what he had done in a panic, his beloved daughter entered the room. Unaware of her father's strange behavior, she approached him, trying to comfort him. But Midas, embracing his daughter with fatherly love, watched in horror as she also turned into a golden statue. Now in despair, Midas understood that this wish was actually a terrible curse. He began to beg Dionysus. He prayed day and night for forgiveness and for the tragedy to be undone. Dionysus, seeing his contrite heart, appeared before him and took pity on Midas, realizing he had understood his mistake.
Dionysus, showing mercy, told Midas to go to the river Pactolus in Phrygia. There, he could rid himself of the curse by washing his hands and body in the clear waters. Midas rushed toward the riverbank without wasting any time and plunged his hands into the water, desperately performing the ritual of purification to be freed from the golden touch. He was freed from his curse by diving into the cool water while washing himself and regained his human nature. He rushed back to his palace and found his daughter in her normal state, seeing that the curse had been reversed. That day, the sands of the river Pactolus shimmered gently with tiny grains of gold. This sight served as a reminder of the painful lesson learned by King Midas about the true values of life. Despite the allure of gold, the value of love and the simple joys of life was far greater. Now let us speak of Chiron, a centaur who was different from others in Greek mythology. Centaurs were generally known for their wild nature, particularly their fondness for wine, in addition to their half-human, half-horse appearance. However, Chiron was quite different from the rest. He was born from the union of the Titan Cronus and the nymph Philyra, and this lineage granted him a unique calmness and wisdom, unlike others. Unlike the other centaurs, he was not a troublemaker who wandered aimlessly in the forests. He established a quiet life for himself on Mount Pelion, known for its peaceful hills in Thessaly. Living in a simple cave amidst the forests and clear mountain streams, he gathered his knowledge and created a home where he could pass it on to others. Chiron possessed great wisdom in the fields of medicine, astronomy, hunting, music, and prophecy. He became a guide whom the heroes and leaders of ancient Greece consulted with respect. Rulers, gods, and goddesses held a deep respect for his justice and intellect. Many legendary heroes came to Mount Pelion to study, seeking Chiron's guidance. Among the most famous of these was Achilles. Achilles was one of Chiron's most special students. Under Chiron's mentorship, the young warrior learned the arts of war, hunting, and healing, as well as grasping the meaning of courage and compassion.
Another famous student of Chiron was Jason,
the leader of the Argonauts who sought the golden fleece. He guided him in learning teamwork and fostered loyalty on his path to leadership. Perseus, who learned to make decisions calmly in moments of danger and to trust himself from Chiron, went on to defeat Medusa and make history. However, his most well-known relationship was with Heracles. Heracles, known by many as Hercules, became legendary for his incredible strength, wit, and skills, yet he frequently visited Chiron for advice and training. During each visit, the centaur sincerely welcomed him, opening the doors of his wisdom wide. One day, a tragic event occurred. Heracles had been invited to a meal hosted by another centaur named Phoulus. The scent of a special wine jar opened at that meal attracted the surrounding centaurs. A violent conflict quickly erupted among the centaurs, who became aggressive under the influence of the wine. In the midst of the chaos, a fierce struggle was taking place between Heracles and the rebellious centaurs. Unbeknownst to him, Heracles fired his arrows to defend himself, but one arrow went astray and struck Chiron. A little distance away from the incident, Chiron, who was watching the fight evolve into a tragic form, was about to face a deadly reality. For the arrow had been dipped in the potent poison of the Hydra. The Hydra's venom was effective enough to overcome any living creature. Although Chiron was immortal, this poison inflicted upon him an eternal and unbearable pain. Despite the great agony he suffered, no medicine or herb could alleviate the pain of this wound. Yet Chiron patiently and stoically endured the process, choosing to bear it silently. Meanwhile, a rare opportunity arose that could slightly alleviate his torment. Prometheus, the Titan who brought fire to humanity, was in great anguish due to the punishments inflicted by Zeus. Chained to a mountain, he was tormented by an eagle every day. Chiron was one of those who best understood what eternal suffering meant. Approaching Prometheus's situation with deep empathy, he showed him genuine compassion. Chiron decided to make a great sacrifice to end Prometheus's bondage. He went to Zeus and offered to exchange his own immortality for Prometheus's freedom. Zeus was deeply moved by Chiron's selfless and noble gesture and accepted the offer. Thus, Prometheus was released and Chiron's unending pain ceased.
Zeus decided to honor Chiron's noble sacrifice by placing him among the stars. Chiron now shone in the sky as a constellation. Today, he is seen as the constellation Sagittarius, a symbol guiding travelers, hunters, and heroes who look up to the sky. Ancient Greek mythology tells not only stories of sacrifice, but also the tragedy of hubris and unrequited love. One of these, the story of Echo, resonates in the silent corners of nature. Echo was a cheerful, beautiful, and energetic nymph living in the forests and on the mountain slopes. With her outgoing personality and musical voice, she loved telling stories. Her narratives and endless conversations always entertained those around her, earning their admiration. However, this trait also led to trouble for her. Zeus, the king of the gods, frequently wandered in the forests,
spending time with the nymphs there. But Hera, the goddess of marriage, had begun to suspect Zeus's disappearances. For this reason, she pursued him in the forests. Echo, encountering Hera during this time, found herself next to the goddess. Echo's long conversations with Hera provided Zeus with an opportunity to escape unnoticed. However, over time, Hera realized that Echo's talking was a distraction tactic and angrily took away her ability to speak. Now, Echo could only repeat the words spoken by others. This harsh punishment deeply wounded Echo. She could no longer express her thoughts or share her joy. In the solitude brought by this life, condemned to silence, she began to wander from place to place. She learned to live with silence instead of the cheerful company and stories she once had. One day, as she was wandering hopelessly in the forest, she encountered Narcissus, a young man famous for his beauty. This meeting would turn into a tragedy for both Echo and Narcissus that no one could have predicted. His handsomeness garnered admiring glances from both women and men wherever he went. His striking appearance attracted many who hoped to win his heart. However, he was Narcissus. Believing himself superior to ordinary people and too perfect for shared love, Narcissus captivated Echo. She admired him from afar. Although she desperately wanted to approach him, she knew that speaking was impossible for her. One day, while Narcissus was walking alone in the forest, Echo secretly followed him. He must have sensed the presence of curious eyes, for Narcissus called out, "Is anyone there?" Echo excitedly murmured, only able to repeat, "Anyone there?"
Narcissus was surprised by this unexpected answer. When he called out louder, "Come closer!" Echo happily emerged and repeated his words, "Come closer!" But as soon as Narcissus saw Echo, he adopted a cold demeanor. As he turned to walk away carelessly, he mercilessly rejected Echo's shy yet hopeful love. "Leave me alone," he said. "I will never love you." These harsh words inflicted a deep wound on Echo's heart. Echo retreated into profound loneliness due to the pain she felt. As her own voice echoed in solitude, she eventually became nothing more than an echo. She vanished among the forests, caves, and mountains. Her words lingered only as echoes. Narcissus believed himself worthy of no one's love, continued on his own path. One day he came to the edge of a clear and silent pool in the forest to quench his thirst. Just as he was about to lean down to drink, he paused. He was enchanted the moment he saw his own reflection. The moment he noticed the beautiful face in the pool, he fell in love with it. Understanding that this beauty was actually his own, from that moment on he became mesmerized by his reflection. Over time, this obsession surpassed everything else. He neglected even eating and resting. Every time he reached out, the face disappeared with the ripples of the water. But he tried again and again, hoping to capture this image. Finally, worn out by hunger and thirst,
Narcissus slowly faded by the edge of the pool. His life, consumed by a beauty he could never grasp, ended with his last breath. The forest mourned this tragic event. Where Narcissus died, a white and golden yellow flower sprouted, reminiscent of the beauty to which he had dedicated his life. Today, this flower bears the name Narcissus and continues to remind us of the past, silently bowing its petals towards the reflection in the water. Though Echo never regained her voice or physical form after her tragic end, her silent echoes still live on in the forests and mountains. These echoes gently repeat her words, making her beauty and presence felt. For travelers and hikers, these echoes become a deep and lasting reminder of unrequited love, the sorrow brought by pride and hubris, and the importance of mutual kindness.
Other stories may be shared softly under the stars and may not boast of epic wars or powerful gods. But these quieter narratives carry messages of humility, compassion, and silent strength. Their teachings remind us that magical wisdom and beauty can be revealed even in small and simple moments, rather than just grand events. Sharing these stories allows us to be part of an endless circle, carrying forward the tales whispered by those who came before us, from the past to the future. At the end of this captivating journey through Greek mythology, let us pause for a moment and reflect on the unique and special thing about these stories. Let us question why they have so deeply affected the hearts and minds of people from the moment they were first whispered around ancient fires until today. What is the secret to their resilience against time? The power of these myths lies in their ability to reflect what it means to be human. These stories, set in a world of gods, heroes, monsters, and miracles, touch upon universal human emotions such as love and loss, courage and fear, or pride and humility. We all see a little of ourselves in Achilles' pride, Prometheus' compassion, or Perseus' bravery. These figures are not merely ancient figures from the distant past. They are like mirrors reflecting our strengths and weaknesses, our dreams and our disappointments. Mythology also offers comforting explanations about where we came from, why we are here, and where we are ultimately going. Thus, it helps us explore life's deepest mysteries. Though time seems to stand still here, these myths always remind us that humans have sought answers to these questions. They gently whisper that one is part of something much greater and more mysterious than oneself. These myths, dating back thousands of years, have always encouraged people to face the uncertainties of life with courage, hope, and humility. No matter how much life develops, the fundamental emotions of human nature remain unchanged. The way we feel fear, dream, love, and struggle is the same as it was thousands of years ago. When we listen to these myths, we realize they are not just stories, but bridges connecting us to one another. Perhaps you can imagine yourself sitting beside the ancient Greek storytellers. You feel their warm voice and listen to their old but ever meaningful stories.
Kindle a fire in your soul as you listen to timeless tales. It is a wonderful thought that these stories, which have traveled across cultures and continents for thousands of years, still have the power to affect you. By uniting us, they help us remember that at our core, we are not so different from one another. Perhaps the next time you look at the stars or sit around a fire, you will be thinking of these things.
Remember Perseus's courage in facing Medusa, the story of Prometheus stealing fire, or Orpheus risking everything for love. These myths are not just old stories. They are vibrant mirrors that gently shed light on who we are and who we can become now. You have spent a considerable amount of time on this journey, exploring the vast and magnificent world of Greek mythology with me. Whether you have followed along closely or listened quietly in the background, I hope you have enjoyed this voyage. You can share which legend or character caught your attention below. I would be happy to hear your thoughts and how much you enjoyed the storytelling. Consider subscribing and turning on notifications today so you don't miss our next mythological history journey or mysterious exploration. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Until next time, stay curious and safe.